Chapter 261. Why didn't you dodge? Nangongyu looked at her in a daze, as if he had lost his soul. Suddenly, his throat lightly vibrated as he started to quietly laugh. Yet no matter how you listened to this laughter, it seemed to be oppressive, like the warning to an approaching hurricane. Sheer, is that what you think? You think the reason I wanted to approach you was to kill you in order to avenge her? In your heart, you've never believed in me, have you? Everything that I've done for you, was it all just meaningless to you? Sheer, is your heart made of stone? Hushi's face turned pale, as it felt like a hand had suddenly grabbed her heart and squeezed it. Her reason told her to never again believe Nangongyu, to never again open her heart. However, the Nangongyu before her eyes currently had an expression filled with depression and despair, like he was being abandoned by the world. Yet just at this moment, her ears abruptly heard Nangongyu's dark and hoarse voice. Or, do you really care about this man? Care about him so much that you wouldn't hesitate to be hostile towards me? If that's so, then he must die. After he spoke, a dark thunderstorm condensed in his left hand, before he then fiercely threw it towards Gu Liufeng's dantian. Hushi's expression abruptly changed while she seemed to hear a loud bang in her mind. With her body instinctively moving as fast as a shadow, she savagely thrust the ice sword in her hand in front of her. A squelch could be heard as the edge of the sword was thrust into a body. Apparently it was only a quiet sound, but to Hushi it was like a clap of thunder echoing in her ears. Hushi was so frightened she immediately released the sword in her hand, and she stared straight at the bright red stain spreading across her vision. Her always calm and collected face revealed a horrified expression for the first time. More than half of the sword made from ice was now piercing the left side of Nangongyu's chest. When Hushi released her hand, the sword was lacking the support of her spiritual power, and slowly turned into liquid, mixing with the blood as it dripped down. Hushi felt her throat dry up. The voice that forced itself out of her mouth was hoarse and strained as she asked, why didn't you dodge? Nangongyu slowly released his grip on Gu Liufeng's throat as his eyes unwaveringly looked at Hushi. The weather in the secret territory was as warm as spring, but at this moment, the surrounding vegetation began to rapidly wither, and the air filled with a terribly cold atmosphere. The eyes of everyone present were filled with fear and shock. Those with low cultivation bases were even trembling in fear. Hushi suddenly took a step forward, shaking as she asked, "How's your wound?" Looking at the position of the wound, it shouldn't be near the heart, but there was an extreme amount of blood indicating that the injury was near an artery. Even for a martial artist, this wasn't a minor injury. Nangongyu, why didn't he dodge? However, Hushi had just stepped forward, when a sudden force fiercely knocked her aside. She staggered twice and almost fell. Her ears then heard Feng Lianying's distress cries. "Brother Yu, are you okay? So much blood keeps flowing. How could this happen?" As she said that, she glared tearfully at Hushi, then bitterly shouted, "Young Master Shi, how could you harm him? Brother Yu has always been kind to you. You actually injured him for a stranger. Even if you have a shameful relationship with Gu Lufeng, doing this was too much." After saying this, she then turned and looked at Nangongyu's wound. As she watched the bright red blood pouring from the wound, translucent tears slowly trickled down her cheeks. "Brother Yu, don't worry. I have the best medicine for your wound in my possession. It will certainly heal you. Such a cruel, wicked, and ungrateful person. We definitely won't be having any encounters with him in the future." Chapter 262. It has nothing to do with you having heard that. Hushi's eyes darkened, and she turned to walk towards Gu Liufeng's direction. "Where do you think you're going?" A roar suddenly echoed around them, seeming as if it would rip apart heaven and earth, while a formidable amount of spiritual power pressure erupted from Nangongyu's body. Feng Lianing was caught off guard as she stood beside him, and she went flying into the air like a kite with its string snapped, crying miserably in shock the whole time. Nie Jinchen immediately caught her in his embrace, asking in a concerned tone, "Little sister Lianing, are you all right?" Feng Lianing, however, pushed him away and rushed back towards Nangongyu. Brother Yu, I'm Lianing. Let me see your wound." However, before she could get near Nangongyu, she was once again sent flying into Nie Jinchen's embrace. Feng Lianing was shocked to discover that Nan Gongyu was now in the center of an invisible spiritual barrier that he had formed, and Hushi was inside the spiritual barrier with him. Nobody could get close to the pair, but Hushi couldn't escape either. At this very moment, apart from Hushi, no one else could enter Nan Gongyu's eyes. Why? Why does brother Yu only have eyes for that bastard? What's so good about that brat? He injured brother Yu, but instead of brother Yu killing him, it seems that he's using every possible means to keep that bastard by his side. Feng Lianing bit on her lower lip hard. So hard that she didn't even realize the blood slowly starting to trickle down her chin. And so now that Hushi was trapped inside the spiritual barrier, before she had time to react, Nan Gongyu's figure abruptly moved and appeared before her in the blink of an eye. And slowly he started approaching her step by step. His stature was tall and slender, with a handsome face that could make every woman in the world captivated with him. But at this moment, his face was positively glacial, like it had gathered thousands of years' worth of ice. This matched his body, which exuded a terribly dark aura. As he slowly approached Hushi, the blood from his chest exuded a strong metallic smell. This, in contrast to his pale and handsome complexion, made him seem like a fallen demon king. Sheer, where do you think you're going? Are you going to that man? Is he that important to you? Hushi's complexion paled. The immense amount of spiritual power pressure being emitted from Nan Gongyu's body was making it extremely difficult for her to breathe. However, when she met with Nan Gongyu's rage-filled eyes, her stubbornness stirred, and she raised her small chin into the air as she coldly said, "In regards to whoever I want to go to, it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with me." Nan Gongyu took a step forward, and in the blink of an eye he arrived in front of Hushi, tightly gripping her shoulders as he asked, "Then who does it have anything to do with Gu Lufeng?" Hushi bit her lip, her expression icy and unbending as she hoarsely said, "If yes, then so what? You can go back to your beloved Ice Lotus Fairy, so please don't interfere with my life from now on." A scarlet blaze suddenly ignited within Nan Gongyu's eyes, and the atmosphere around him was abruptly filled with a crackling noise that echoed all around them. At the same time, terrible dark clouds covered the sky of the secret territory, layer by layer. In an instant it seemed like it was about to rain, and that a major catastrophe was about to occur. Hushi's face was filled with shock, and without having a chance to speak, she suddenly felt extremely dizzy. It was like her body was being drawn into a powerful vortex. The enormous amount of spiritual power within the vortex constantly fluctuated as it pulled at Hushi's body, making her feel like she would be torn apart at any moment. However, very quickly, she felt herself being held in a warm embrace. That embrace emitted a formidable amount of spiritual power pressure that enveloped her and blocked all the pain that she was experiencing. She then vaguely seemed to hear a man's gloomy voice echo in her ears, and it was tinged with a slight amount of exasperation and deep love. "Sheer, you're mine. You'll forever be at my side." Chapter 263. Infidelity. Hushi drowsily opened her eyes as she felt the breeze caress her cheeks and tease her hair. As she went to move her hands and feet, she instead felt her body being restrained by something. When it sensed that she wanted to struggle, whatever was confining her seemed to tighten. Looking up, Hushi saw Nan Gongyu's pale and handsome, yet cold complexion enter her sight. She was so shocked that she started struggling harder to free herself. However, Nan Gongyu's hands were restraining her, and he tightened his arms around her body. "Nan Gongyu, let me go." "Dream on." Nan Gongyu replied coldly. "I said it before, but in this lifetime only you can be my princess, and only you can be my woman. If you dare to get close to other men, then I'll kill all the men around you." Hushi was annoyed and grit her teeth as she retorted, "Who's your woman? Wasn't your woman your beloved little sister Lianing? Since you like to imprison people, you can just go back and lock her up to prevent her from randomly disturbing people." Nan Gongyu lowered his eyes as he looked at Hushi. His expression was like condensed frost as he said in a somewhat helpless tone of voice, "When have I ever said that Feng Lianing is my woman? In this lifetime, I've never even touched a woman's hand. The only woman who I've ever been intimate with and touched is you, Sheer. Who'd believe you?" Hushi suddenly started moving her spiritual power about, intending to struggle free from Nan Gongyu's embrace. But when she fell to the ground, she was surprised. She was actually able to free herself so easily from Nangongyu. As Hushi was confused, she started examining her surroundings, and became surprised when she discovered that she was now in what appeared to be a valley. Surrounded by tall and sturdy sheer cliffs, the peaks couldn't even be seen due to being blocked by the clouds. Where is this? How could we come to this place? Where are the other people? Hushi glared at Nangongyu as she asked him. Nangongyu faintly replied, because of you cheating and being intimate with another man, it made my spiritual power arise and become unstable. It seems to have accidentally triggered a restriction in the secret territory, so we were both sent to this place. I also don't really know where we currently are. Who are you saying cheated? Hushi angrily said. I'm a doctor. My work is to help and treat people. Cheating your head. The chilliness within Nangongyu's eyes melted a little as he revealed a hint of delight, but in the blink of an eye it disappeared, changing into a look of confusion and grief. But for him you stabbed me with a sword. In your heart, isn't he more important than me? Hushi raised her eyebrows. Her gaze couldn't help but land on Nangongyu's body. The always powerful and callous Hell King was at this moment wearing clothes filled with bloodstains. His handsome face was pale without a trace of color, while his arched and elegant thin lips were slightly pursed, displaying his frustration and hesitancy. So she reflexively said, I don't like owing others, and I didn't want to owe him and shopkeeper Zhou a favor. If you had killed him and he died because of me, I would have owed them. Who knew that even though your cultivation base is so high, you unexpectedly couldn't dodge that sword? Having heard that, Nangongyu's eyes lit up with a bright light, and the lost look on his face disappeared without a single trace. So for sheer, that Gu Lufeng is just a stranger you don't want to owe a debt to? Hushi sneered as she said. He naturally means less than His Highness Hell King and Ice Lotus Fairy's intimate relationship. Nangongyu revealed a helpless look. Sheer, how many times do you want me to say it? He hadn't yet finished speaking when his face suddenly changed, and he reached out his hand to pull Hushi back into his arms. Before Hushi could react, she felt a formidable and fierce energy rise behind her back. Chapter 264. Believe in your man. While carrying Hushi, Nangongyu exerted himself to turn around. Then he gently pushed her to the side. Almost at the same time as she was in the air, Hushi turned her head to see behind her, and noticed that a gigantic rock bird had appeared. The rock's whole body was light brown. When its two enormous wings were spread out, it almost covered the entire valley. Its sharp beak seemed to flash like the cold tip of a bent blade as it faced their direction, threateningly aiming to pierce them. The appearance of this rock was too sudden, as it had appeared without any warning at all. It was as if it had torn its way out of an invisible space, so even Hushi's divine senses hadn't detected it. However, Nangongyu had managed to sense it. Moreover, his first reaction was to shove Hushi aside. Unfortunately, the rock's powerful and sharp beak severely pierced Nangongyu's left shoulder during his protection of her. Blood instantly splattered everywhere, dyeing Nangongyu's body with blood, and adding an additional wound on top of his previous one. Nangongyu! Hushi screamed in fear, and wanted to rush towards him. But the next moment she found out that she couldn't move, because her body was enveloped by a transparent spiritual barrier. She was confined by a void spiritual barrier. The moment Nangongyu had pushed her away, he had wrapped her in a void spiritual barrier to protect and confine her. What does that bastard think he's doing? Just then, Hushi saw Nangongyu stumble back several steps due to the impact, yet a corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. His hands suddenly gripped the rock's beak that was as solid as iron, and with all his strength, he lifted it up using its beak. Then, he ruthlessly smashed it to the ground. The strong smell of blood wafted towards the tip of Hushi's nose. Examining Nangongyu's bloody left shoulder, as well as the wound on the left side of his chest that had yet to stop bleeding, she could no longer bear it and yelled, "Nangongyu, you bastard, quickly release me!" Although it was only for a short moment, Hushi had clearly sensed that Nangongyu's spiritual power was weakening. She recalled the warmth that had wrapped around her and protected her when space had ripped apart and twisted with that vortex, as well as Nangongyu's overly pale complexion. He must have expended too much spiritual power in that space distortion to protect her, and coupled with the injury on his chest, his current strength would be about 30% less than normal. However, that rock was a fierce beast with a horrible amount of spiritual power pressure. It was even more powerful than the golden python. How could the current Nangongyu deal with it and escape unscathed? After throwing the rock, Nangongyu's figure swayed slightly and his face paled further. When he heard Hushi's words, he laughed proudly. "Sheer, you have to believe in you, man." Just as his words faded, his right hand unfolded, and in a flash a dark, slender, and long sword appeared in his hand. A black aura curled upwards from the sword's body, and accompanied by the sword's spiritual power, the originally clear blue sky of the secret territory suddenly turned completely dark. Next, following lightning and thunder, a gale erupted. It was a force that slowly built up power in the valley, capable of extinguishing heaven and earth. And at this moment, the rock that had been knocked down stood up. But because of Nangongyu's attack, the feathers covering its entire body were now puffed up, while its brown beak was stained with blood. With its pair of fierce, bloodshot eyes, it appeared particularly frightening. Suddenly, the rock's wings fiercely flapped, creating a violent gale that mixed with sand and pebbles as it attacked Nangongyu. Hushi's heart felt like it was being squeezed by something, and as she spoke, the voice escaping her mouth was hoarse and trembling. "Nangongyu, quickly release me, do you hear me?" Within the gale, Nangongyu's hair was being blown in every direction. His entire body was dyed red with blood, and his clothes were disheveled. But nonetheless, he gave off a wild and unruly charm. Chapter 265. Will you die if you don't show off? A corner of his mouth lifted into a charming smile, and he said with a gentle voice, "Relax, I'll come to you after I finish dealing with this beast. Just obediently wait for me." After saying that, he waved his left hand. Following this, the void spiritual barrier suddenly soared into the air, bringing Hushi to a remote cave at the furthest corner of the valley. This place was far from the battlefield, and was protected from the dark thunderclouds and gale. From here you could see the gale sweeping sand, pebbles and grass into the air, and a space enveloped by a dark aura in the center of it all. The fierce battle was being carried out before her eyes, yet she couldn't see or do anything to help. Suddenly, within the dark aura, there came a violent cacophony of loud sounds. Shortly afterwards, the rock soared high into the sky. It then waved its 100-meter-long wings, which made a sharp whistling sound echo throughout the valley. All the broken rocks in the valley were swept up by the gale, while all the vegetation was pulled up from the ground, scattering everywhere. Some even flew towards Hushi, but fortunately she was completely covered by the void spiritual barrier. Hushi's hands tightly clenched into fists when she saw Nangongyu fly like an arrow into the sky, leaving only a shadow as he faced the rock. As one black and one yellowish-brown shadow collided in the air, it sent a terrible shockwave throughout the valley. It was as if fireworks bloomed magnificently in the sky as brown feathers rained down as far as the eye could see, while a thick smell of blood filled the sky. Imprisoned in the cave, Hushi at this moment sensed that the energy of the void spiritual barrier was gradually weakening, which meant that Nangongyu's spiritual energy was also gradually weakening. She was so anxious it felt like she was being burnt alive as she constantly pounded against the void spiritual barrier, but all to no avail. Suddenly, a shrill bird cry pierced her ears and a glaringly bright flash of thunder lit up the sky, lighting up a black shadow savagely slicing the rock from its neck, straight to its heart. Hushi stared blankly at the sky, completely oblivious to the void spiritual barrier disappearing. With a tremendous thud that echoed loudly throughout the valley, the rock's dead body fell from the sky and smashed a huge hole into the ground. Then, Nangongyu slowly descended from the sky still holding his sword and landed beside the rock. Hushi heaved a sigh of relief. Loosening the fist she'd clenched so tightly that she'd hurt her palms, she then quickly ran towards him. Unfortunately, once she was close enough to Nangongyu and could clearly see his appearance, she sucked in a cold breath. Other than his face, Nangongyu's entire body was filled with wounds. And since he was absolutely drenched in blood, it gave off the impression that he had been bathing in it. One of his hands hung powerlessly at his side, displaying evidently that his bone was broken. But even if this was the case, when Nangongyu saw her, a corner of his mouth raised to expose an affectionate smile. Sheer, did you see that? Just as I said before, I'm your man and I'll definitely be able to protect you. Hushy's heart suddenly slowed with a sour and painful twinge as an incomparable anger and worry rushed forth one after another, causing the choked voice that left her mouth to tremble. Nangongyu, will you die if you don't show off? Who wants to be protected by you? Although she was speaking like that, she still immediately took out her silver needles and quickly stood before Nangongyu. Acting like it wasn't worth anything, she continuously poured precious ninth secluded spring water onto his wounds and stuffed his mouth with medicinal pills. For the first time, Hushy's hands were cold and trembling as she held her silver needles. She didn't want to admit it, but she'd been so scared and frightened when the void's spiritual barrier had weakened little by little. Nangongyu grabbed Hushy's small hands that were cold and trembling, softly saying, Sheer, don't worry, I'm all right. Who was worried? Hushy angrily responded while gnashing her teeth. Nangongyu reached out his hand to gently rub at the redness in corners of her eyes, his voice soft and husky as it reached her ears. I was worried that I have no way to protect you, worried that Sheer will think that I'm not good enough, and worried that you'll like other men. Chapter 266. I'll never let go. His warm breath tickled Hushy's ear and made it burn, so she quickly edged further away. This guy simply didn't care about his life. His injuries were obviously serious. For an ordinary person, getting this badly hurt would be fatal, but he was acting like he wasn't even the one who was injured. The absorption rate of ninth secluded spring water was 100 times more powerful when compared to other normal healing medicines. So using the spring water, Hushy poured some on his wounds, while the rest she made him drink. Color slowly began restoring itself to Nangongyu's pale complexion, while the garish wounds on his body began to rapidly heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, Nangongyu's body had many injuries, and most of them were so deep that even his bones could be seen. Even if they healed, sinister scars would still remain. When Hushy examined those scars, her brows couldn't help crease as it reminded her of that extremely disturbing battle scene, and the fear in her heart. Nangongyu laughed lightly as he teased her. Oh, the wounds are extremely ugly, huh? Does Sheer dislike me now? Hushy clenched her teeth to suppress the hoarseness and choked tone in her voice, fiercely responding, Yes. So ugly that just looking at them is irksome. Nangongyu raised his eyebrows, shamelessly pressing closer to Hushy as he whispered, Don't most people say that a man with a scarred body is sexy? Hushy was treating the bone fracture on his arm, and when she heard that, her movement of pressing her hands on his wound momentarily slowed. If other people think you're sexy, then you can go and find them. Hushy sneered. Nangongyu released a muffled groan, his face showing a pained expression. Following this, his pained expression turned into one of grief with his long eyelashes slightly hanging down. Now you know what pain feels like. Hushy's heart couldn't bear it, and the voice that left her mouth was unyielding as she applied excessive pressure to his wound. In the future, let's see if you dare not treasure your life. As long as Hushy is by my side, no matter how heavy the injury, this king won't be afraid. Nangongyu abruptly reached out his uninjured hand to wrap it around her slender waist, pulling her into his embrace. Sheer, you won't leave me, right? No matter where you go, I'll always follow you. I'll absolutely never let you go. Always follow me. Are you a malicious spirit? Hushy glared at him. Then she turned to free herself from his arms. She no longer wanted to pay attention to this man's shameless words. Instead, all of her energy was being spent on treating Nangongyu's injuries. Whether it was the horrible scars or the broken arm. While all of them were terrible to see, in actuality they weren't that big of a deal. With Hushy's medical skills and the ability of a nascent soul-stage martial artist's powerful regeneration and healing, she could guarantee that within a few days Nangongyu would be completely recovered. Rather, the most troublesome part was the excessive amount of spiritual power that Nangongyu had consumed when he was fighting with the rock. Due to such a depletion of spiritual power, his meridians were burnt in many places, and they would need time to be nursed back to health. After some thought, Hushy took out a decoction used to restore meridians that was made of high-grade spiritual herbs that grew in her space, and water from the 9th secluded spirit spring. However, when she went to pass the decoction to Nangongyu, he shook his head without hesitation. Sheer, you can see that I'm currently unable to move freely, so why don't you feed me instead? Hushi. It was only your right hand that was fractured. Your left hand is still okay. How come you can't drink the medicine on your own? Nangongyu turned his head to the side, unwilling to look at the black medicinal liquid in Hushi's hands any longer. With a gloomy and sad face he said, You personally gave Gulufeng, that brat, acupuncture treatment. Your hands even touched his body, yet you refused to feed me. Sheer, in your heart, am I less important than him? A corner of Hushi's mouth twitched. She refused to say a word. Nangongyu's expression filled with resentment and sadness, and suddenly grabbing his black long sword, he used it to support his body as he stood up. Chapter 267. Protect you throughout this lifetime. Unfortunately, with his spiritual power currently depleted and his physical strength completely exhausted, before he could properly get up he staggered and heavily fell to the ground. Nangongyu. Hushi rushed to support him, cold sweat appearing on her spine due to fright. Are you unwilling to live anymore? Nangongyu's jet-black eyes were scorching hot as they stared fixedly at her. Just half an hour ago he still had the appearance of a monster that could extinguish the world, but now he looked like a pitiful dog with his watery eyes. Hushi felt defeated by him and ultimately, she picked up the bowl on the side, then unhappily said, Okay, I'll feed you, Lord Hell King. A corner of his mouth slightly raised. Regardless of Hushi's opposition, half of his upper body leaned against her as he happily accepted Hushi feeding him the medicine. Occasionally he would touch Hushi's soft and delicate cheek, his expression one of satisfied contentment. But after barely being fed 2 spoonfuls, his hand touched Hushi's wound on her left shoulder, and realized that it felt cold. Instantly his eyes darkened, and the glint of a cold light flashed within them. Hushi was just about to feed him the 3rd spoonful of medicine, when she abruptly felt a warmth on her shoulder. Then, a burst of spiritual power covered the wound on her left shoulder. For a split second, her cold body and frozen to the point of numb left shoulder instantly restored to their original condition. Hushi's eyes widened. Nangongyu, this guy. Obviously, his spiritual power was depleted, and with great difficulty, he was finally able to restore some, but now he'd used it to treat her minor injury. Is there something wrong with this guy's brain? While Hushi had still been inside the secret territory's Zijin Palace, she'd naturally sustained an extremely heavy injury, but it was mainly the depletion of her spiritual power, and she hadn't had enough time to recover it yet. After drinking some of her spiritual spring water, she'd felt much better. And as for the injury on her shoulder, she'd intended to transfer her spiritual energy around the wound to expel the cold air and help it to naturally heal. Compared to the current condition of Nangongyu's injury, Hushi's small injury was simply nothing. Yet just as Hushi was about to say something, she heard Nangongyu's dark voice vowing in her ears. Sheer, believe in me, I'll protect you throughout this lifetime. Hushi's body slightly startled and her heart felt as if it was being scratched by something. It was itchy yet gentle. However, very quickly, she remembered the scene that she'd seen not too long ago. Nangongyu had turned around to examine the extent of Feng Lianying's injury, leaving Hushi behind. Furthermore, for Feng Lianying, he'd pierced Gulufeng with a sword. The fire in her heart instantly extinguished as if cold water was poured on it. Like the frigid winter wind blowing into a warm room, Hushi's complexion hardened and became cold as she indifferently said, Nangongyu, since it's an impossible thing to do, why even promise in the first place? You only dare to say it while we're in the secret territory, but if I really killed Feng Lianying, would you honestly let me off? Nangongyu blankly stared at Hushi, watching as a corner of her mouth lifted into a cold smile as she said, You said that you'll protect me throughout this lifetime. So if I tell you that the injury on my body was caused by Feng Lianying, what would you do? Would you kill your beloved little sister Lianying? Nangongyu's body stiffened slightly, and he lowered his eyes to hide the surging emotions within them. Sensing the icy atmosphere and alienation being projected from Hushi's body, he really wanted to say something. Unfortunately, due to circumstances, he had to swallow back the words that were already on the tip of his tongue. Nangongyu stayed silent, as she'd expected. Seeing this, although Hushi had long ago prepared her heart, An unspeakable disappointment and rage still surged within her heart. She sneered and said, "Gu Lufeng and I merely injured her a little, and yet you couldn't wait to choke me. If I'd really killed her, weren't you going to want my life in revenge? Nangongyu, even though things are like this, you still dared to say that you'll protect me throughout this lifetime? Don't make me laugh." Chapter 268. I would rather not. After Hushi's words left her mouth, Nangongyu suddenly reached out his hand to pull her into his embrace. In his eyes, there was a burning red light that hinted at countless suppressed emotions and patience, like a dam threatening to burst at any time. "Sheer, do you really think that I would ever harm you? Even if I had to choke myself, I still wouldn't be willing to hurt even a strand of your hair. I said that I wouldn't allow anyone to hurt you, and that includes myself." Hushi wanted to fiercely knock Nangongyu's hands away, however. While his health was obviously poorly, the strength he used to confine her was unbreakable. Even the wound on his arm that had already been bandaged began to unravel due to the strain he was exerting. Hushi stopped struggling and grinding her teeth. She said, "You said that you won't allow anyone to hurt me? But you used your hands against Gu Lufeng. Nangongyu, you have to know that if it wasn't for him saving me, I would have died long ago by Feng Lianying's hands. Haha, I was foolish. How could I have ever believed that your spotless, pure, and kind-hearted little sister Lian Ying would be so malicious as to attempt to kill me?" The sharp redness in Nangongyu's eyes flashed, while his face showed the mixed expressions of coldness and distress. "Sheer, I believe every word you've said." "You believe me and yet you still want to kill Gu Lufeng? Isn't the reason you want to kill Gu Lufeng due to him injuring your little sister Lianying? If it was switched to me being the one who wanted to kill Feng Lianying, wouldn't you even want to kill me? Sheer, do you have to be so dense?" Nangongyu asked as he stared at her with a grief-filled expression. Hushi was confused. What did that mean? "I wanted to kill Gu Lufeng, not because of Feng Lianying, but because you were too close to him and ignored me. You healed him, yet you didn't even look at me. And in order to save him, you opposed me without hesitation." Hushi raised her head to look at Nangongyu, only to see that his head was turned to the side with an uncomfortable expression on his face. There was even an obvious blush coloring his ear. So it wasn't because Gu Lufeng had injured Feng Lianying, rather, it was because she and Gu Lufeng had been too close that Nangongyu wanted to kill him? What did that mean? Don't tell me that the supremely dignified Hell King would unexpectedly admit such jealousy. Under Hushi's unfathomable gaze, Nangongyu was somewhat embarrassed. Suddenly, his hands reached out to pull her into his embrace. Then he fiercely said, "Sheer, you're mine. No one except me can touch you. If I run into such a situation again in the future, even if you're angry, I will still do it again. I'll never let off any man who dares attempt to make a move on you." Once he finished speaking, he bowed his head and using a slight amount of pressure, he bit down on her pink, tender lip, leaving red teeth marks. Hushi cried out in pain and pushing him away, she angrily asked, "Nangongyu, are you a dog?" Although Nangongyu's words were pleasing to hear, whenever she recalled the scene of Nangongyu abandoning her to take care of Feng Lianying, she felt extremely uncomfortable. In Hushi's heart, a deep scar still remained. Without a doubt, in Nangongyu's heart, no matter how interested he was in her, there would still always be a place for Feng Lianying too. Regardless of whether it was out an emotional bond, a sense of responsibility, or some other secret concern, the fact remained that Feng Lianying was special to Nangongyu. And she, Hushi, was bound to monopolize whichever man she fancied. No one was allowed to covet him, and no one could snatch him away. If he had another person in his heart, then she'd rather not want him. Hushi lowered her eyes and indifferently said, "Don't you think you care too much? Your closeness with your little sister Lianying. I'm not asking anything about it, am I? So why do you get to have a say in who I touch?" Nangongyu's expression sank, as if he wanted to get angry. Yet when he saw Hushi's stubborn little face, he then sighed and said with a trace of resentment in his voice, "But Sheer, isn't this your responsibility?" Chapter 269. Risking one's life for adventure, huh? Hushi was stunned. "What does it have to do with me?" Nangongyu pulled her closer and laughed. It's exactly like how I help you to get rid of the flies around you. You're also responsible for driving away the women around me. Hushi's expression blanked out for a while as she watched Nangongyu's handsome face slowly edging closer to her. Such a world-toppling face was now enlarged before her eyes with a tender and loving smile gracing his lips. It was just like a scorching sun dazzling people's eyes. Sheer, you should know that all the women throughout the Jinling Kingdom want to marry this king, and are lined up from Yanjing City, all the way to Yuyang City. This king won't disturb them, but since you're my princess, it's naturally your duty to drive those women away. Don't you agree? Hushi felt his hot breath fanning her neck, while his bright eyes burned as they stared at her, seeming to swallow her whole. Her mind was in chaos as she abruptly struggled to get away from Nangongyu. And with a taut expression, she said, "You stop imagining that your love is reciprocated with an uninterested person who would want to help you drive away those women. As long as you don't provoke me, it wouldn't be any of my business even if you were flooded by flies." Nangongyu still wanted to say something, but he was fiercely pushed to the ground by Hushi's palms filled with spiritual power. Picking up the bowl of medicine on the ground, she fiercely said, "So, do you want to drink this medicine or not? If not, then should I throw this medicine away?" Nangongyu noticed that although her expression was fierce, the depressed emotion filling her eyes had started to decrease. Unable to help it, he heaved a sigh of relief, then quickly took the medicine from Hushi's hand and obediently drank it. After drinking the medicine, Nangongyu inspected their surroundings and saw that there was no longer a visible crack in the space they were currently in. Unfortunately, a trace of concern still remained within his heart. Sheer, this place must be a rift in the secret territory. Because it's existed for many years and gone through multiple spiritual energy surges, it's connected itself to a separate section of the secret territory. Nangongyu easily used the black sword in his hand to draw a line, tracing out a space of around 100 square meters. That rock was a 6th-rank spiritual beast, and a 6th-rank spiritual beast is already considered to be amongst one of the more powerful spiritual beasts. If the rock left its smell in an area, even if other spiritual beasts were to enter, they wouldn't easily dare approach. Sheer, during the time I move my spiritual energy in meditation, you can't leave this area. Although there were still a lot of things Nangongyu wanted to say, he held them in. In the sealed dragon domain there were countless hidden sections full of unknown dangers, all similar to high-level spiritual beasts like the rock. For a martial artist, entering one of the sealed dragon domain's hidden sections was really like risking one's life for adventure. Even though Nangongyu was arrogant, he wasn't conceited. While he had the ability to defend himself, he didn't dare promise that he would be able to enter and escape with Hushi in one piece. This was the reason why he hadn't let Hushi know about the sealed dragon domain. At this very moment, in Nangongyu's storage ring, countless treasures and medicinal pills were stored. All of them were capable of causing fights between Foundation Establishment stage, Meridian stage, and even Gold Core stage martial artists. These were things that he had specially scoured every corner of the secret territory for, in order to give them to Hushi after he had left. His, Nangongyu's woman, was someone he wanted to protect properly, but he also wanted to give her the best presents to make her happy. If Hushi was willing, he would gladly accompany her to other secret territories suitable for Foundation Establishment stage and Meridian stage martial artists to help her advance in the future. However, it was currently suicidal for her to enter such a dangerous place as the sealed dragon domain. But it was now too late for those words, so Nangongyu kept his mouth shut. Since Hushi was already here, no matter what, he would thoroughly protect her at all costs. Chapter 270. You, hop up. Taking advantage of Nangongyu's meditation to digest the 9th secluded spring water and the spiritual energy from the medicine, Hushi began to examine the rock's dead body. Unlike the golden python's broken bones, the rock's flesh was still intact, so the whole body could be collected. The rock's body was too broken by Nangongyu's strikes, while the sharp beak and claws that could have been used to make weapons were almost completely damaged by Nangongyu's sword. Knowing that only 30 to 40% of Nangongyu's strength remained, but that he was still able to beat a 6th-rank spiritual beast to such a miserable pulp, Hushi's heart couldn't help but quiver. In the end, Just how strong was this guy's real strength? After Nangong Yu finished absorbing the medicine's energy, he temporarily froze his internal energy to give his body time to recuperate, because although the rock's smell was currently lingering in the area, there was also the strong stench of blood. This, coupled with the unstable cracks in their present space, meant that it wouldn't be safe to stay in this place for a long period of time. Just as he finished converging his spiritual energy and raised his head, he saw Hushi with her sleeves rolled up and readying herself to sort out the rock's dead body. He couldn't help smiling as he said, "Although a lot of spiritual power is contained within the rock's flesh, an unpleasant smell of urine lingers on it which is hard to remove and causes it to be hard to swallow. Sheer, if you're interested in the rock's corpse, just take its inner core. The rest isn't useful." Ignoring him, Hushi used a sharp dagger to cut down the rock's flesh, following along its veins. Without raising her head, she then answered, "Oh, it doesn't taste good? Then you won't get to eat any." After saying that, she threw the last piece of meat smeared with blood into her space. Then, lifting her head, the perspiration trickled down her hair onto her smooth white forehead. Her phoenix-like eyes were glistening brightly just like stars as they stared up at him. Nangong Yu was fascinated by her lofty face, and he couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. "Okay, I was wrong. I forgot that the most unpalatable of foods can be made into the most wonderful of treats in my shear's hands. My shear is amazing." Hushi snorted coldly, "Nonsense. Are you done absorbing the medicine's energy? Where are we going next?" Nangong Yu pointed his finger at the top of the cliff. "Anyway, let's leave this valley first. We'll discuss this again later." After saying that, he used the black sword in his hand as a prop and slowly went to stand up. But before he could stand up straight, he staggered and almost fell back to the ground. Hushi immediately gripped his wrist and carefully started examining the vein located there. The more she checked, the more pronounced the crease between her brows became. While Nangong Yu's body had now been replenished with a lot of spiritual energy, this spiritual energy, however, had gathered in his dantian and wasn't able to spread to his meridians. Because the injury in his meridians was somewhat serious, it needs some time to self-heal. Moreover, his stamina had been almost completely used up, so it wouldn't recover within such a short amount of time. Hushi frowned as she looked at the high cliff, vaguely making out the tip of it through the layer of clouds. With Nangong Yu's current body, it would be too difficult for him to climb up. Yet it would also be too dangerous if they didn't leave, as they were near an unstable crack in space. "You hop up," Hushi said as she suddenly stood in front of Nangong Yu, her back facing him. Nangong Yu was stunned to the point of standing still, and for a long while he didn't make a sound until Hushi once again urged him to hop up. Then, coughing lightly, he said, "Actually, I can go up by myself." Hushi turned to glare at him. "If you want to add another wound to your previous one, go ahead and climb up by yourself, but if a 6th-rank spiritual beast appears again, I'll have to fight it alone." Nangong Yu's expression was somewhat uncomfortable, and his jade-like white complexion was slightly flushed as Hushi glared at him. So he then grudgingly said, "This king's legendary reputation is going to be ruined by sheer hands." Chapter 271, Purple Abyss Vine. After saying that, he leaned his body forward onto Hushi's back and without hesitation, his hands encircled her slender waist. Hushi only felt something warm envelope her, and was completely unaware of the weight she was now supporting. Instead, all her senses were concentrated to his lips as they slowly exhaled beside her ear. "I entrust this king's lifelong happiness to Sheer's hands. Sheer, you have to take responsibility." "Responsibility, your sister." Hushi grabbed Nangong Yu's hands and gathering all her spiritual power, she then soared into the sky towards the top of the valley. The whistling wind passing their ears brought with it a gust of cold air. Yet the man on her back was keeping her extremely warm. For a moment, Hushi's mind wandered. It seemed like it was only an hour ago when they were on opposing sides, and on the brink of severing their relationship. But now it had become a situation of dependency regarding life or death. Fate really loved to tease people. What sort of future would there be between Nangong Yu and herself? The cliff of the valley was really high, so even though Hushi's spiritual power was almost depleted, they still weren't able to see the peak. Fortunately, Not too far away there was a cave in the cliff wall, allowing her to temporarily catch her breath and replenish her spiritual power. Landing steadily in front of the cave, Hushi was able to examine it up close and realized that while it looked shallow at first glance, it actually led deeper into the cliff wall. It only appeared shallow because it was covered by a thick layer of wisteria. However, this wisteria was quite strange as its branches were transparent, and with a closer look, you could see a liquid flowing inside of it. Hushi couldn't help herself and took 2 steps closer to take a look at it. Suddenly, Nangongyu's voice sounded in her ears. "Careful, this is a 5th-rank spiritual plant, Purple Abyss Vine." Unfortunately, Nangongyu's warning came just a breath too late. Hushi's finger had barely brushed against the plant when she felt a strong wind attack aiming towards her face. The harmless-looking purple vines of a moment ago had moved together like a whip and thrashed themselves towards Hushi's body. Hushi was shocked and quickly retreated several steps, but the speed of the purple vines was faster. Furthermore, every vine heading towards her seemed to have the striking strength of a Meridian stage martial artist. Yet, just as Hushi was about to be hit, the sound of lightning abruptly crackled and echoed by her ears. The purple vines were struck by this wave of lightning and stopped, seeming to be hurt as they trembled along the ground. Several of the vines were completely burnt by the lightning and quickly shrunk back towards the cave entrance. Nangongyu quickly pulled Hushi behind his back, and holding up the black sword in his hand, he prepared to attack the purple vines. But Hushi suddenly gripped Nangongyu's hand and said with exasperation, "Nangongyu, are you crazy? Even now you're still daring to use spiritual power. Are you looking for death?" Nangongyu froze, and before he had time to recover, he'd already been dragged behind Hushi's back. Next, a powerful earth attribute barrier appeared to protect him and keep him firmly behind her. "Just obediently wait in there for me. If you dare move, then don't blame me for being rude." Seeing the girl's slim back blocking him from harm, Nangongyu became momentarily stunned. For the first time, there was someone who treated him like a treasure and willingly stood in front of him to protect him. This feeling was very strange, yet also tremendously wonderful, causing his entire heart to feel sweet and sour as if it was soaked in honey. Why was his sheer always so special? Currently, though, Hushi was focusing on the danger before them. How would she know that behind her Nangongyu's head was lost in thought? Seeing the purple vine's second attack heading their way, Hushi's heart lurched and she abruptly gathered her spiritual power. In the blink of an eye, a golden flame condensed into a spectacularly patterned ball on her fingertips before she quickly smashed it towards the purple abyss vine. Chapter 272, Spiritual Demon Plants were afraid of fire, so sure enough, as soon as the fireball touched the purple abyss vine, it instantly started burning. However, unexpectedly, even though the purple abyss vine was bathed in the fire, it didn't seem frightened like it had when it was being struck by the lightning. Instead, it seemed to tremendously enjoy the fire. All of its purple vines swayed gently in the flames, and at the same time, the spiritual power contained within the fire seemed to be diminishing. These purple vines were actually devouring the spiritual fire? A moment later, all of the golden flames were completely extinguished. Hushi's expression became grave as she prepared to withstand the purple abyss vine's next wave of attack. However, the purple abyss vine once again responded beyond her expectations. They indeed moved towards Hushi, but it had no intention of attacking her. Rather, it entangled itself around Hushi's feet and body with an action similar to fawning and acting coquettishly. Raising its sturdiest vine in front of her, it then swayed it to and fro. This pose made it seem like it was asking for something. For a moment Hushi was dumbstruck. Could it be that this purple vine was an M? Did it enjoy being attacked and wanted more? During this time, Nangongyu standing behind her stepped forward, and taking out a porcelain bottle filled with ninth secluded spring water, he poured 2 drops onto the purple vine swaying in front of Hushi. In the next instant, the scene unfolding before Hushi caused her further shock. The leaves of the purple abyss vine suddenly started emitting the hint of a violet light, and during this, they all stood straight up and swayed in sync. Hushi could have sworn that if there was music, the purple vines would have been dancing around in a lively manner. After moving about for a while in a synchronized dance, The violet light faded without a trace and the sturdier vines once again eagerly wrapped themselves around Hushi, this time including Nangongyu in its fawning. Then, almost as if it was impatiently begging, it rubbed its leaves together to make a rustling sound. Hushi still hadn't completely come to terms with what had just happened when she heard Nangongyu slowly speaking as he narrowed his eyes. "You want this?" As he shook the porcelain bottle in front of the purple vines, it immediately started swaying in exuberance. If it hadn't been afraid that Nangongyu would attack it with lightning like before, it would have already snatched the bottle away. Hushi, however, was stunned. "It can understand what we're saying?" Nangongyu answered. "There aren't that many fifth-rank spiritual plants capable of using divine sense, but the purple abyss vine is one of them, and is therefore known as a spiritual demon plant. Spiritual demon plants can generally communicate with people like spirit pets." After saying that, Nangongyu looked at Hushi with affection in his eyes. "Sheer, you have a muddled dantian and possess the spiritual power of all 5 elements, so advancing the spiritual root of your wood attribute is immensely important for you. Although the rank of this purple abyss vine isn't particularly high, it's still useful. Moreover, it's possible for it to advance in the future, so you should take it as your spirit pet." Hearing that, Hushi's heart was moved. You could say that possessing the spiritual power of all 5 elements would make Hushi exceptionally powerful, but at the same time, the road of ascension was also tremendously more difficult when compared to other martial artists. Since she was still a low-level martial artist, it wasn't too bad though, as she could only accumulate a certain amount of spiritual power. But if she wanted to advance to gold core stage in the future, she would inevitably need to make a breakthrough on the spiritual power of all 5 elements. This would help to balance her spiritual power and raise her chances of succeeding. It wasn't too difficult for her to advance the dual attributes of fire and water, but for several other elements, she had yet to find a method to help advance them. So in regards to this, it would definitely be useful for her to take a wood attribute spirit pet. But while many people took in all sorts of spirit pets, most of them were beast pets. How many of them were able to subdue plant spirit pets? Would the purple abyss vine really want to be her spirit pet? Chapter 273, Subdue. Thinking of it, Hushi frowned until she suddenly felt Nangongyu lightly scrape the tip of her nose. His voice filled with a teasing tone as he smiled. "Little fool, of course, it's not easy for other people to subdue spiritual demon plants, but you have something they like the most, spiritual spring water. Don't tell me you still don't know how to bargain with them?" When she heard that, Hushi was unable to refute Nangongyu and quickly spread out her left hand. In an instant, spiritual spring water started to slowly condense in her delicate white palm. Sure enough, once the purple abyss vine sensed the rich and fragrant spiritual energy, it immediately climbed up and wrapped itself around Hushi's arm like a child wanting to grab spiritual food. While the purple abyss vine was greedily absorbing the spiritual energy, Nangongyu took advantage of the situation to immediately grab Hushi's right hand and gently bite one of her fingers. The scarlet blood then seeped out to slowly drip onto the purple abyss vine. In a split second, an intense violet light constantly pulsed around the vines, causing them to stand up straight and make a rustling sound. It was almost like it was angry and tried to resist by desperately struggling. Hushi's eyes frosted over and she coldly said, "You wanted spiritual spring water, so naturally you have to pay the price. I, Hushi, hereby promise that as long as you become my spirit pet, in the future I'll allow you to drink as much ninth secluded spirit spring water as you want." After she finished speaking, the purple abyss vine suddenly stopped shaking and struggling. Yet the leaves still continued to move and make a rustling sound like it was in an intense discussion. Eventually, all of the purple abyss vine stopped swaying, and it moved in front of Hushi. Her blood, including the spiritual spring water on her palm, slowly disappeared into the purple abyss vine's body. The next moment, a violet light gleamed on her palm. The mark of a purple vine then flashed before it slowly disappeared from view. Hushi used her divine sense to internally inspect her body, and found that the purple abyss vine really was residing within her. Focusing her mind and stretching out her right hand, she watched as a purple vine was instantly released and hit a huge rock on one side of the cave. In the blink of an eye, the huge rock was crushed into dust. This process was extremely fast and the sound was very faint, so if you weren't watching carefully, it would have been easy to miss it. All it took was the flash of a purple light, and it looked like the huge rock was shattered due to the weather. Hushi was satisfied as she returned the purple abyss vine into her body. She found that the purple abyss vine could freely lengthen and shorten according to her thoughts, and moreover, its speed was extremely fast. It was definitely more effective to use than her previous bone whip. But while Hushi was satisfied, the purple abyss vine within her body was very unhappy and continuously protested. Although spiritual demon plants usually couldn't speak, the owner of the contract could generally understand what they meant anyway. As a result, Hushi felt like there was a voice in her head constantly scolding her for not keeping her word and being untrustworthy. Hushi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Focusing once more, she moved the purple abyss vine into her space, leaving only a short length of vine within her body as a weapon. However, when the purple abyss vine was moved into her space, Hushi discovered a strange thing. She could actually see the state of her space even though she wasn't currently in it. She could even see Dandan and little golden dragon lying on the edge of the spirit spring, Dandan's broken voice ringing in her ears. Although the little golden dragon was still in a coma, she could tell that the two little guys' bodies were recovering, which made her heavy heart feel relieved. Chapter 274. The perfect wife without the purple abyss vine obstructing her sight. Hushi could now clearly see the cave on the cliff. It was a cave made entirely out of rock, and except for the purple abyss vine, there weren't any traces of other plants or small reptiles around. The cave entrance wasn't large and only allowed for 2 people to enter at the same time, but when inside, they found that the inside was exceptionally wide. They were unsure if it was because there weren't any snakes, rats, ants, or any sort of plant, but the atmosphere inside the cave was fresh and dry. Hushi had originally intended to bring Nangongyu to the top of the cliff, but now it seemed that this cave that had been guarded by the purple abyss vine was more secure than an unknown cliff. It also seemed more suitable for healing. Nangongyu brought out a huge night pearl to light up the entire cave, while Hushi removed all the items of furniture she had stored in her space. Big items such as a large bed, table, and chairs, and small items such as food, tableware, and chopsticks. Everything that a person could think of was brought out one by one. This was also the difference between Hushi and other martial artists. An ordinary martial artist's storage space ring wasn't so large, and with only a small space, they were barely able to store treasures and medicinal pills. So why would they be willing to store such insignificant things like these? But Hushi's space was extremely large. So even though she was removing things like the table and chairs that she had placed in a corner of the Spirit Firmament Palace, it still wasn't anywhere near full. All her things in the Spirit Firmament Palace were organized by category, so she wasn't worried at all that storing junk like this would take up the room she could use for treasure items. Since she could enjoy the pleasure of having such plentiful resources, Hushi had never treated her people unfairly, and she was naturally willing to make her adventurous life more comfortable. Hushi supported Nangongyu and helped him to lie on the large soft bed, but instead of cultivating right away, he chose to smile as he watched Hushi busily moving back and forth. And as he was watching, his expression slowly became more and more gentle. When Hushi turned around, she caught sight of Nangongyu smiling joyfully as he looked at her. With his handsome face shining under the light of the night pearl, it made him seem like a seductive demon, and caused her heart to palpitate like crazy. Looking displeased, she glared at him and asked, "What are you laughing about? Didn't you say that you wanted to recover from your injury as soon as possible? Why haven't you started cultivating yet?" Nangongyu slowly sat up and faintly laughed, "Because I was reluctant to remove my eyes from you." Currently, Sheer seems like a hard-working little wife busy looking after her husband. Well, to have such a perfect wife, this king is really blessed with the fortune of 3 lifetimes. Dream on. Hushi grabbed one of the pillows on the bed and smacked him over the head with it. "Who's your wife?" Being heavily hit by the pillow, Nangongyu uttered a muffled groan and bowed his head in pain. It wasn't a soft cotton pillow, but rather a weighty buckwheat pillow. So although not completely convinced that the great Hell King would be hurt by a buckwheat pillow, Hushi still couldn't help but worriedly move a few steps closer to him. Hey, are you okay? But before she had even finished asking, Hushi suddenly felt a strong force grab her, and for a moment, she felt herself spinning in the air. Once she recovered her sense of balance, she realized that she had been dragged onto the bed by Nangongyu, and was now firmly pinned beneath him. Nangongyu gazed down at her while the two of them were so close together, and within Nangongyu's pitch-black eyes, it seemed like there was a brightly burning flame, being watched like that caused Hushi to be flustered, and she moved her hands and feet to struggle free. However, purely comparing their strengths, she was nowhere near Nangongyu's match. She wanted to use spiritual power to free herself, but she was worried about his injuries, so she didn't dare act rashly. Unfortunately, this left her trapped in an impossible situation. Using her hands, she forcefully pushed at Nangongyu's chest and angrily shouted, "What are you doing? Quickly let me go, otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Nangongyu bowed his head, and his black, silk-like long hair caressed the side of Hushi's face. With the ends of his hair sweeping across the side of her face, she felt a startlingly numb feeling spread throughout her body. Chapter 275. Will never let her off. Hushi felt her heart beating wildly in her chest, and became anxious to get out of Nangongyu's arms, but then she heard his dark and husky voice slowly saying, "Never, I'll never let you go. Sheer, just accept your fate. In this life, you're mine." Nangongyu then lowered his head and slowly inched towards the soft pink cherry lips he always thought about. It was such a sweet taste, an ecstasy he felt down to his bones, and one that he had missed for many days. However, the second before his lips landed, Hushi slightly turned her small face to the side and made his warm kiss land on a corner of her mouth. Although he had made contact with her exquisite skin and could smell her sweet fragrance, which was extremely alluring, the originally hot atmosphere in the cave was slowly becoming colder. Nangongyu could feel Hushi's resistance and disaffection towards him. When Hushi turned her head back, her gaze was frozen as she decisively stared at him and slowly opened her mouth to say, "Nangongyu, no matter how pleasant it is to hear your confession, there are still some things I have to tell you first. Feng Lianing, I will definitely kill her. I don't care who she is or how powerful her backers are. I absolutely refuse to let her off. One day I'll make her pay me back what she owes me 100 times. Hushi's voice was ice cold and filled with a resolute tone, with the trace of murderous intent mixed in. It made those who had previously heard it become colder than they were before. She admitted that her current skill was inferior, and that she was still unable to kill Feng Lianing, with no possible way to confront the Luli sect. But just because she wasn't currently capable of it, that didn't mean that it wouldn't be possible in the future. She, Hushi, had always paid a debt of gratitude with kindness, and revenge with hatred. She wouldn't let anyone off who dared provoke her people. Even if she had to oppose Nangongyu, she still wouldn't hesitate to even the score. One day, she would establish her own power, so that the people in this world won't dare to easily humiliate her again. For all of this, she could only depend on herself and not rely on other people. Nangongyu stared in a daze at Hushi's burning and shining eyes that were like an unfathomable clear pond. They resembled an unpredictable ocean, so arrogant, so conceited, but also so completely breathtaking. This was his sheer. A complicated look flashed across Nangongyu's face, and within his deep eyes, an intense emotion was surging. After a brief internal battle, he ultimately bit his tongue to withhold the words wanting to free themselves from his mouth. Hushi wasn't surprised that Nangongyu didn't answer her, and without waiting for him to come up with excuses, she firmly pushed him off her to get up and indifferently said, "You stay in here to heal properly, I'll go guard outside." In any case, Nangongyu had sustained an injury when he'd saved her, so she would always remember this favor. Just as Hushi went to quickly leave the cave, Nangongyu's soft voice came from behind her, filled with affection and sadness. "Sheer, Sheer," he gently called her name twice, and then that hoarse and magnetic voice disappeared into faint sighs. He obviously didn't say anything, but Hushi felt like there was the trace of a wound on her heart. Her steps slightly faltered, and then, no longer wanting to stay, she left the cave. Hushi walked out of the cave and took a deep breath, finding that it was only then that her anxiousness could calm down. Releasing the purple abyss vine, She restored it to its original form to cover the cave entrance once again. When the purple abyss vine saw Huxi, it immediately started to sway vigorously. It seemed extremely joyous but also very excited. Whether it was just an illusion, Huxi felt that even though the purple abyss vine was only in her space for a short period of time, it seemed a lot sturdier and solid. The leaves were also plumper, while its originally transparent purple stems and leaves seemed darker too. Chapter 276. The one who causes distress. Huxi watched it sway in obvious excitement, even though its thick vines were still motionless. However, she noticed that it looked as if it was eating and digesting food. A corner of Huxi's mouth twitched, and pushing aside the purple abyss vine's branch that was stretching over to fawn before her, she gave it a few orders and then entered her space. She made sure to attach a part of her divine sense to the purple abyss vine though. That way she would be able to keep a close eye on her surroundings. As soon as she entered her space, she heard the sad sobbing of Dandan. Sensing a new presence in the space, Dandan suddenly whipped his head around like a bird startled by the snapping of a twig. When he saw that it was just Huxi, he immediately leapt into her arms. "Mother, what? I thought that I'd never see you again, Mother." Dandan's cries were extremely heart-wrenching, as if he wanted to vent out all of the fear and worry that he'd been carrying these past few hours. Currently, Dandan's body had reverted back to his original appearance, but his previous round, smooth and tender body had now become flat. His body color now also appeared a little transparent, displaying the look of one in poor health and undernourished. Huxi pinched his small round face with a sad expression on her face and reproachfully said, "In the future, you're not allowed to take your own safety as a joke, do you hear me? Even if it's to save me, you can't do it." When Dandan was still incubating, he had practically needed to absorb a city's worth of spiritual energy before he was able to break out of his shell. In fact, while his body contained an extreme amount of formidable power, that same amount of power represented his life source. If the power was ever halved and weakened, he would return to the shape of an egg and possibly even lose his life. Acting like a spoiled child, Dandan continuously rubbed his head against Huxi's chest. Seeing him ignoring her words, Huxi couldn't help but say, "Dandan, even if I die, as long as the shumi space still exists you can survive and you won't have to return to being an egg. Once the space has a new owner, you can still live happily. You've been lonely living an egg for so many years, so do you want to become an egg again? In the future you should be obedient and avoid taking unnecessary risks. Do you understand?" "I don't want that." Dandan tightly clutched at Huxi's hair while his small mouth flattened into a thin line, his expression revealing his urge to cry. "I don't want Mother to die. I don't want a new owner. If I saw Mother die, then Dandan would rather never come out and forever be an egg." "What, Mother? Don't abandon Dandan." Huxi sighed, and for a moment her heart was full of a bitter yet soft feeling. This little guy, how could it so easily make people distressed to the point that even she, with a heart of stone, couldn't help but be soft-hearted and moved? Huxi kissed his small cheek and softly said, "All right, I promise you, Dandan, that I won't die and abandon you. Dandan is a good child, so don't cry anymore, okay?" Dandan's mind was only matured to that of a 4 or 5-year-old child, so when he heard that he immediately felt happy. Clasping his cheeks that were kissed by Huxi, he continuously giggled, his little face filled with happiness and joy. However, when his gaze landed on the body of the still unconscious little golden dragon on the edge of the spirit spring, he immediately reverted back into a crying bun. "Mother, why hasn't Long Long woken up yet? Is Long Long going to die? Mother, you're so powerful, so save him, okay?" Carrying Dandan, Huxi made her way towards the edge of the spirit spring, and seeing the little golden dragon's body covered in cuts and bruises, her heart found it difficult to bear. She had only just formed a contract with this spirit pet, so she didn't yet have any sentimental feelings for it, and so far their interactions had been ones of looking down upon one another. However, she never would have thought that it would go to such an extent to save her. Chapter 277, Burning Heaven Realm? Divine Dragon Fruit? Just a quick look at little golden dragon's body, and she could tell that he had a large burn spot, as well as a multitude of sword injuries. His originally golden yellow scales were now broken and bent out of place, while his horns were broken off at the base, with his body and flesh being so burnt in some parts. Although the wounds had already stopped bleeding due to the effect of the spring water, it still looks miserable and hideous. Hushi stepped forward to examine the little golden dragon's condition, and discovered that even though the water from the 9th secluded spirit spring had strong healing properties for people, it seemed that its effects on the little golden dragon weren't all that effective. Moreover, she was an expert in treating people, so she was completely unfamiliar in regards to the dragon's body structure. Also, even if she wanted to use her silver needles on his acupuncture points to see if it helped heal him, it would be impossible. The little golden dragon's breathing was currently very weak, while his initially arrogant and haughty eyes were now tightly closed. Hushi peeled one of his eyelids back to take a look, and found that the pupil seemed slightly dilated. In any case, this wasn't a good sign. Her brows creased tightly, and Dandan, who stood on the side, pulled at a corner of her clothes with an expression of hope and expectation as he looked at her. Hushi quickly took out a bunch of medicine bottles. Then, she boiled together a medicinal liquid made of the medicinal pills mixed with 9th secluded spirit spring water, and soaked the entirety of the little golden dragon's body in it. Due to the medicine's powerful effect, the wounds that were still seeping out blood began to completely heal, while his dark scales started to return to their previous luster. But at best, such treatment could only cure the little golden dragon's surface injuries. For his internal injuries, Hushi was helpless. The plan, for now, was to at least leave this secret territory earlier, and then find a treatment method. Perhaps that old glutton who claimed he was Daoist spiritual master Xianqing would have a few methods to help her? Hushi was immersed in her worries when suddenly, the little golden dragon's faint voice was heard. Go to the Burning Heaven Realm, find the Divine Dragon Fruit. Burning Heaven Realm? Divine Dragon Fruit? Hushi startled when she heard this. She didn't know where the Burning Heaven Realm was, but she did know about the Divine Dragon Fruit as she had read about it before in the All Living Things record. It was a kind of spirit clan demon elixir. A martial artist's spiritual base could quickly promote after taking it, especially during the promotion period, and it could even help raise the power of their level advancement. After a demonic beast takes it, it was possible for it to enhance its abilities and restore its core. It was also said that no matter how severe the internal injury was, it could completely recover. But according to the things written down in the All Living Things record that Hushi had seen, the Divine Dragon Fruit was only found in the spiritual plantations of Xianluo continent. It had never before been seen in Miluo continent. Going along with what the little golden dragon had said though, could she find the Divine Dragon Fruit in Burning Heaven Realm? Little dragon, do you know where Burning Heaven Realm is? However, in response to Hushi, the little golden dragon could only breathe weakly as it had exhausted all its strength answering her a moment ago. Hushi let out a sigh, and then proceeded to mix together a tub of medicinal liquid once again. Completely soaking the little golden dragon in it, she left only its little head floating above the surface. Although this concoction couldn't completely cure the little golden dragon's internal injuries, it could at least ensure that its condition wouldn't deteriorate. Dandan leaned against the edge of the tub and worriedly stared at the little golden dragon, his soft and immature voice continuously asking, "Mother, will Long Long really be fine?" Little dragon just spoke about a way to treat him. So after we leave this sealed dragon domain, we'll go find the whereabouts of Burning Heaven Realm. Going to Burning Heaven Realm will be able to cure Long Long? Then that's great, mother. We'll go immediately. The next moment, Hushi shoved something in Dandan's mouth, causing him to be unable to talk. After he had swallowed whatever was in his mouth, he exclaimed, "Mother, what was that? It's delicious." While laughing, Hushi stuffed one into the little golden dragon's mouth before she lightly said, "This is a 6th rank demon beast's core. I'm hoping that it'll have some effect on healing the wounds you two have. A 6th rank demon beast core contains an enormous amount of power, so you have to absorb it properly." Chapter 278. Nangongyu was afraid? Currently, Dandan was feeling an immense amount of energy spreading throughout his body, making his previously empty stomach become warm and feel exceptionally comfortable. This feeling, compared to drinking spirit spring water, and eating spiritual plants and fruits from the space was much better. Promptly obeying Hushi, he closed eyes and began to absorb the energy. At the same time, the little golden dragon's breathing started to regulate while he was still unconscious. Watching Dandan's dried-up body slowly become rounded again, Hushi couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. So sitting cross-legged at the edge of the spring, she began to cultivate. Although she had just gotten the Maha inheritance, she was extremely interested in it. She believed that as long as she completely mastered the cultivation technique of the Maha inheritance, beating down Feng Lian wouldn't even be an issue anymore. Time flowed, and in the blink of an eye, one night had already passed. In the cave, Nangongyu opened his eyes to examine his condition, and was satisfied when he found that the injury to his meridians had nearly completed healing. His dried-up dantian had also been filled with spiritual power, while his strength was restored to at least 70%. Shier's ninth secluded spirit spring water was indeed the best healing medicine for martial artists, especially for superficial wounds and spiritual power depletion. It was simply 100 times more powerful than ordinary medicinal pills. Nangongyu stood up and went to walk outside the cave, but just as he arrived at the entrance, his heart started palpitating. His figure suddenly rushed out, but there was only an empty area before his eyes. Apart from the occasional rustling of the purple abyss vine's leaves, Hushi was nowhere to be seen. 11 yar? Nangongyu subconsciously shouted out loud, not even realizing that his voice was somewhat trembling due to fear. Why wasn't Shier here? Did she get angry and disappointed so she left, completely cutting off all ties with him? Or did she encounter danger? With these thoughts swirling around in his mind, Nangongyu felt like his throat was being tightly clutched, making it extremely difficult to breathe. But soon he heard a strange whistling sound, and following that, Hushi gracefully floated down from above to firmly land in front of him. When Hushi had woken up in the morning and noticed that Nangongyu was still meditating, she had gone to the top of the cliff alone to examine it first. She had even left the purple abyss vine guarding the entrance, so that when Nangongyu awoke he would know that she hadn't just left. However, when she suddenly heard Nangongyu shouting, she had hurriedly come back down. Hushi watched as Nangongyu stared at her, and just as she was about to speak, Nangongyu suddenly strode forward and pulled her into his arms. Nangongyu's strength was tremendous, and as he pressed her body against his, it nearly crushed her bones. It hurts. Hushi frowned and wanted to push him away, but she found that Nangongyu was actually trembling. His body holding her was cold, unlike the scorching temperature it normally was. So even though he tried to conceal it, Hushi could still feel that his body was continuously trembling while he hugged her. Nangongyu was afraid? What was he afraid of? Hushi was puzzled, but her body betrayed her reasoning, and reaching out her hand, she gently stroked his back as if she was comforting a child who'd been awakened by a nightmare. Her voice was gentle as she asked, "What happened?" Nangongyu tightened his hold on her and buried his face in her hair, refusing to speak for a long while. Just as Hushi was about to ask again, Nangongyu abruptly released her and with a gloomy voice asked, "Where did you go? Why is there such a potent smell of blood coming from your body?" His voice was full of anxiety and anger, but it was also mixed with distress and worry. Nangongyu abruptly grabbed Hushi's hand and began to search for where she was injured. Chapter 279. "Tie you to my side." Hushi pushed him away, and with a blush covering her face she angrily said, "Where do you think you're touching? Pervert." "I'm fine. I wanted to take a look what's on the top of the cliff, and in passing I dealt with a few dark devil wolves." A dark devil wolf was a third-rank demonic beast. Although its cultivation base wasn't very high, they usually lived in packs, which meant that if you encountered one, it was the same as meeting a dozen of them. Even knowing that Hushi's current cultivation base was high enough to handle them, Nangongyu still had some lingering fears. "Why didn't you call me?" Hushi stared at him with puzzlement. Just a moment ago fear had been plastered across his face, but now it had clearly transformed into anger. Was he bipolar? "They're nothing but third-rank demonic beasts. I can easily deal with them." After saying that, she turned towards the cave to pack up, but after barely walking 2 steps, Nangongyu pulled her back. Hushi wanted to struggle free but found herself unable to now that Nangong Yu's strength had been restored. There was no way she could fight him. Soon, Nangong Yu's hand captured both of her wrists behind her back, while the other hand held her slender waist and firmly pressed her against his chest. Next time, no matter what happens, don't ever leave me. Do you hear me? Hushi angrily struggled and tried to break from his hold, but instead, she ended up being pressed tighter against him, resulting in almost no space left between the two of them. Nangong, you might as well find a rope to tie me up with at this rate. Hushi had only said that because she was furious, but when Nangong heard it, his eyes instantly lit up. Good idea. Following that, a length of finger-thick golden silk appeared in his hand, and before Hushi had time to realize what was going on, he moved to tie her hands behind her back. This was a high-level spiritual weapon called golden silk. Flying swords were unable to cut it, while water and heat weren't capable of damaging it. If she was tied by that, would she still be able to escape? Hushi struggled with all her might. Nangong, are you kidding me? Do you think I'm joking? Nangong leaned closer to her ear and whispered in a hoarse voice. Who told you to be so disobedient? Always thinking of running away from me. Instead of always worrying about your safety, it's better to tie you to my side. Hushi felt the icy cold spiritual power of the golden silk wrap around her wrists and became extremely anxious. Before, even though she had used all of her spiritual power, she still hadn't been able to break free from Nangong hands. Sheer, I can untie you, but only if you'll promise me that you stay by my side at all times. How could Hushi currently dare to argue with this crazy man? A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him, so she hastily nodded and agreed. All right, I'm afraid of you, so I'll promise you, will that do? Now quickly release me. With that, Nangong was satisfied and swiftly released her hands. Immediately jumping back a step, alertness and caution were on her face as she glared at him. These kinds of unyielding yet delicate eyes resembled the luminous eyes of a little leopard. Seeing them, Nangong felt his mind drift away and suddenly reached out his hands to pull her towards him. Hushi abruptly felt herself moving backwards uncontrollably, and when she returned to her senses, she found herself once again in Nangong embrace. Nangong lowered his head and passionately kissed her bright red lips. After a moment, once he released her lips, his voice was lower and softer, like a gentle flow of water. Sheer, I've wanted to do that since a long time ago. Hushi ferociously wiped her lips that were extremely painful from being kissed, and angrily glared at him. Unfortunately, she didn't want to provoke this crazy man again, so she turned around to enter the cave. After she finished tidying up her stuff, the two quickly flew to the peak of the cliff. Yesterday, it had been Hushi carrying Nangong, but this time, regardless of Hushi's protests, Nangong had embraced her waist and carried her to the peak in only a moment. Chapter 280. Rumors. At the peak of the cliff there was a stretch of green hills, and not too far in the distance, there were the dead bodies of more than 10 dark devil wolves lying on the ground emitting the thick smell of blood. Before Hushi had time to take the bodies of the dark devil wolves into her space, Nangong wanted to help her and sliced downwards with his sword. Unfortunately, when his sword went to cut into the bodies of the dark devil wolves, it crushed them into dust and caused perfectly good food materials to be wasted. Hushi fiercely glared at Nangong and seeing him rubbing his nose while looking helpless and awkward, she turned around and couldn't help but utter a soft laugh. She hadn't expected such an embarrassed expression on the almighty Hell King. It was so surprising that it was very cute. Hushi had barely finished sorting out what was left of the dark devil wolves, and was about to call out to Nangong that they could depart, when she suddenly sensed something and turned to gaze towards the distant sky. A moment later, a few figures flew over and abruptly landed in front of them. Before Hushi could get a clear look at who they were, she saw a black-clothed man step forward with large strides and drop to one knee in front Nangong, greeting him with clasped hands. "Master, are you all right?" The person before them was Qing Long. Of course, it wasn't only Qing Long, there were also a few bodyguards from Hell King Manor, most of them high-level Meridian stage martial artists. But what surprised Hushi the most was that Gu Lufeng and Zhou Yenin were also there. As soon as Gu Lufeng spotted Hushi, he slowly walked up to her and asked, "Little Yue, are you okay?" Hushi didn't have time to reply before she felt something tighten around her hand, and by the time she realized what was happening, she had already been tugged behind Nan Gongyu. With a gloomy look on his face, he fixedly glared at Gu Lufeng, a dangerous light flashing within his eyes. "Young Master Gu, what did you think would happen when she's by my side?" Gu Lufeng stared blankly, following which he revealed a meaningful smile and lazily said, "There's no need for your Highness Hell King to be so petty. You two were opposing each other before, so I was unaware that you and Little Yue were companions. An exchange of blows may lead to friendship, and since your Highness Hell King won't hurt Little Yue, let's shake hands and get along." His explanation didn't make Nan Gongyu's expression better. It instead caused it to become darker. "Shut up. Who allowed you to call her Little Yue? Who would want to shake hands with you? Go far away from Sheer." Gu Lufeng looked at him with ridicule on his face and spread out his hands as he laughingly said, "You can say Sheer, yet I can't say Little Yue? Little Yue, you say something, am I right?" Nan Gongyu pulled out his flying sword with his complexion as black as storm clouds. "You're courting death." Gu Lufeng seemed to be shocked as he took 3 steps backwards, but the expression in his peach blossom-like eyes was still relaxed, as if he was having fun teasing. Okay, in the future I'll call him Shiyu, that's okay, right?" Yet after a brief pause, he rubbed his chin while his line of sight swept back and forth between Nan Gongyu and Hushi. After what seemed to be a moment of contemplation, he meaningfully said, "This attitude of Hell King towards Little Yue, Shiyu, you can really make one's imagination run wild. It's just that. Why was there a rumor on the streets about you and that Ice Lotus Fairy? Your Highness Hell King, to be so hot and cold like this and have an affair. It's not good at all." Nan Gongyu was stunned. "What rumor?" "Naturally, it's a rumor surrounding your marriage." Gu Liufeng's charming peach blossom-like eyes widened. He was obviously still wearing a mask, but it gave people the perception of grace. "It's well known that Hell King Manor will be connected by marriage to one of Mi Luo continent's 4 large sects, Luli sect, and that Hell King and Luli sect's young clan head, Ice Lotus Fairy, had long found affinity with the other, and that you'd been yearning for each other secretly all this time. As soon as Ice Lotus Fairy leaves her closed-door cultivation, breaking through to nascent soul stage, the two of you will finally forge an alliance. Your Highness Hell King, this news is known by everyone in Yanjing City. Don't tell me that you don't know about this." Chapter 281. The space cracks. Nan Gongyu's eyes instinctively looked towards Hushi, while Hushi snorted coldly and turned her head away to avoid looking at him. His face became extremely cold. Without bothering to answer Gu Lufeng, he instead chose to look at Qinglong with eyes containing a bitingly cold murderous intent. Qinglong hurriedly took a step forward and cautiously said, "Answering Master, these rumors were spread by Intoxicated Happiness Square a while ago. We had originally wanted to deal with these rumors, but Juke did some investigating and found that Intoxicated Happiness Square was Luli Sec's property. She also said, Master, that the friendship between you and Ice Lotus Fairy isn't ordinary, so if we handled it rashly, it would affect your relationship with Luli sect. Therefore, it has been delayed up until now." It would have been better if Qinglong hadn't spoken those words, but once he did, Gu Lufeng couldn't help but leisurely laugh as he strolled to Hushi's side and said, "Little Yue, did you hear that? So they've actually had an unusual friendship since a long time ago." Hushi coldly glared at Gu Lufeng, causing him to rub his nose and reluctantly say, "All right, Shiyu." Nan Gongyu's gloomy and cold gaze glared at Qinglong, making Qinglong, who was being stared at so bluntly, feel cold all over. He had the feeling that he would be kicked by his master at any moment. Shrinking his neck into his shoulders, he looked up and whispered, "Master." Nan Gongyu coldly said, "Once we return, I want to see Intoxicated Happiness Square destroyed. If you can't even properly handle this kind of matter, all 4 of you better get out of Hell King Manor." "Yes, Master." Qinglong breathed out a long sigh of relief and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead before he then took a step backwards. Hushi was now bored of hearing about Ice Lotus Fairy, so she turned and looked at Gu Lufeng. "How did you find this place?" It must be known that Nangongyu and Hushi hadn't disappeared normally. Rather, they were drawn into the space crack. If the others had wanted to follow their trail to come here, it was simply impossible. Gu Lufeng said. This one would like to thank that black-clothed bodyguard belonging to His Highness Hell King. After both of you disappeared, Feng Lianing, that malicious woman, and Senior Nia, joined together to try and kill me. Fortunately, that brother came to the rescue. Hushi glanced at him before lightly snorting. Would you have really been wiped out by Feng Lianing and Nia Jinchen? They had no hope of getting rid of you. You who pretends to be a pig being eaten by a tiger. She had in no way been inattentive when Gu Lufeng had been fighting with Feng Lianing. If it hadn't been due to Nangongyu been on nascent soul stage, even if Nia Jingchen had joined in, Gu Lufeng still would have won with ease. Cough cough. Gu Lufeng seemed to choke on his own saliva and stroking his chin in disbelief he said, Little Yue, you actually have so much confidence in me. This is really my honor. Nangongyu was watching on the side, and seeing Gu Lufeng and Hushi talking so happily together, he felt like there was a fire nestled in his heart. He was itching to slaughter that frivolous kid who wore a mask. However, because of the rumors surrounding his supposed marriage from earlier, he didn't want to provoke Sheer into getting angrier. Due to this, Nangongyu was feeling somewhat uneasy, and he didn't dare act rashly. Speaking of this, he really was wronged. He obviously hadn't known anything about this rumor, and what's more, from childhood up till now he'd been never close to any woman. Now that he finally had someone he loved, he kept being misunderstood and ignored. It simply made an unspeakably frustrated and irritated mood boil within him. When Qinglong saw that his master was covered in a murderous aura that he was unable to vent, how could he not understand? So quickly stepping forward, he said, Prin Koff, young Master Shi. This humble one and master have established a blood contract, so even if we're miles away from each other I can still sense master's location. Therefore, I was able to bring young Master Gu with me to find this place. This space crack has a high possibility of tearing apart, so all the way here this subordinate was worried, but fortunately, you and Master are all right. Chapter 282. Gluttonous Wuyu. When Hushi recalled the warm power that had wrapped around her when she was in the space crack, her expression couldn't help but become slightly gentle. However, Gu Lufeng standing nearby continued to add oil to the fire by saying, Little Yue, in the future you must be careful of Feng Lianing, that poisonous woman. TSK. You didn't get to see the sinister expression on her face after you and Hell King had disappeared. Even I myself had goosebumps when I saw it. I think she regards you as a powerful enemy who wants to snatch away her boyfriend. A woman who's jealous to the core will do whatever's necessary, no matter how unreasonable it is. Hushi was too lazy to correct Gu Lufeng of that nauseating address, and hearing what he had said she sneered. Even if she doesn't come to find me, it's unlikely that I'll ever let her off. At the end of the day, we'll see who moves faster and whose methods are more ruthless between the two of us. Gu Lufeng clapped his hands and laughed loudly. Little Yue, I like your take on revenge of hatred and forthright character. If I currently had wine, I would definitely have a drink with you, as I agree with you, my friend. Right, when you deal with that venomous woman, remember to call for me, as I have a great deal of hatred for her due to her injuring Yenin. So long as His Highness Hell King doesn't interfere, I believe that I still have the qualifications to help you out. After saying that, Gu Lufeng glanced towards Nangongyu and saw a dark and gloomy face glaring back at him. Nangongyu's expression was like he had just drunk vinegar, and was on the verge of erupting. He obviously didn't care about the life or death of Ice Lotus Fairy, so Gu Lufeng couldn't help but smile. It seemed that the rumor really was unfounded. He hadn't expected that His Highness Hell King, who'd always been cold-hearted and never close to a female, to actually be fond of a man. Nevertheless, the beautiful youth was to some degree more beautiful than a celestial being in a painting. Just as Hushi was about to reply, she sensed movement, and in the next second, she saw a silhouette rapidly fly over them and land right before Nangongyu. It was one of Nangongyu's trusted aides, Wu Yu. Wu Yu first saluted Nangongyu, then reported the result of his explorations of the secret territory. After finishing, he turned his head and saw Hushi, causing him to immediately exclaim, Prin cough. Young Master Shi, why are you here? Hushi nonchalantly responded with, why can't I be here? No, young Master Shi, of course you can be here. Wu Yu swiftly changed his stunned expression into a smile of fawning. I was just so deeply emotional because Bai Hu, that boy, couldn't find you outside. He even scoured all of Yanjing City. Yet he still couldn't find you. Hushi raised her brows in puzzlement. Why is Bai Hu looking for me? Naturally, it's to protect you. Chapter 283. Shameless and without integrity. Cough cough. Wu Yu, you better shut up. A cold and deep voice abruptly sounded, interrupting Wu Yu's chatter. Wu Yu had always been slow to react, and turning his head, he noticed that Nangong Yu's face had darkened to the point where it could almost freeze water. Shuddering all over, he subconsciously moved closer towards Hushi and muttered, hee hee, that just take it as if I'd never said anything. I don't know anything, I don't know. After that, he quickly turned to look at Hushi with a twinkle in his eyes, and if there had been a tail behind him, it probably would have been wagging. Young Master Shi, ever since I ate the spiritual food you made, I couldn't eat any other food for many days. Now that I've finally seen you again, it's really such a fortuitous event. So do you have anything to eat? Gu Liufeng's eyes were full of shock as he stared at Wu Yu in confusion. He seemed to have found out an incredible fact. This man before him, wasn't he the owner of Gluttonous House? He hadn't expected that one of Yanjing City's most famous buildings, Gluttonous House, would actually belong to Hell King Manor. In the end, how many secret forces did Hell King have? No, that's not the point. The point is that Wu Yu, who to everyone's eyes was the mysterious, powerful, and cold-blooded owner of Gluttonous House, was privately so shameless and without integrity. An expert gold core stage martial artist was actually begging for food from little Yuer. And what's more, he didn't look the slightest bit ashamed. Gu Lufeng felt like his 3 points of view had sustained a great impact. Qinglong's face twisted as he held his forehead. Could he say that he didn't know this idiot? With Wu Yu's conduct, he didn't believe that he could proudly stand side by side with him as one of Hell King's personal bodyguards. He refused to acknowledge Wu Yu as it was simply making him too ashamed. What Wu Xian had said was right. This gluttonous kid would one day be killed by his own mouth. Hushi looked at Wu Yu's sparkling eyes and watched as the corners of his mouth impossibly stretched wider and brighter. When she heard the sound of him swallowing his saliva, her mouth couldn't help but twitch. I believe I said last time that it wouldn't be repeated. I'm not a personal chef for Hell King Manor, so don't expect food from me every day. She liked to cook and had only intended for her food to be used as a way to reward herself, not for it to be wasted on other people. Dandan was her closest spiritual pet, so it wasn't a problem. And as for Nangongyu, anyway, she didn't like the feeling that she had to serve other people. Hushi lifted her foot to leave, but Wu Yu rushed over and grabbed her skirt, giving her, if you don't give me a meal, I won't let you go. Look. Young Master Shi, as long as you give me some delicious food, I'll do anything you order me to do. I'll work extremely hard and won't hesitate at all. Whenever you, young Master Shi, send me on an errand, as long as it isn't harmful to Hell King Manor, I, Wu Yu, will brave any difficulty to achieve it. Blue veins twitched on Hushi's forehead. She wanted to get away from him and leave, but Wu Yu's unreasonable behavior and bawling had reached a completely shameless point. Oh well, although she was too lazy to cook, she still had some food that she had prepared earlier in her space. Forget about it, she would just give in and give some to him. She couldn't afford to throw away this shameless scoundrel without integrity just yet. Hushi withdrew a roast chicken from her space and threw it at him. And without waiting for her to say something, Wu Yu grabbed the roast chicken and started to devour it. The crispy golden roast chicken was fragrant with tender meat. Emitting strong spiritual power, it was accompanied by the smell of seasoning that wafted around everyone present, making them all unconsciously swallow their saliva. Gu Lufeng had originally scoffed at Wu Yu's shamelessness, but now he couldn't help but breathe in deeply and feel his stomach begin to rumble due to emptiness. Chapter 284, Greenwood Realm. I say, little Yuer, you can't favor one and discriminate against the rest. We're partners that just fought side by side. You gave this guy something to eat. So can't you give me something to eat too? We've not eaten for quite a while, so quickly give me some roast chicken too. This time it was Zhou Yan'an's turn to facepalm and shake his head. He never would have thought that his young master could also be so shameless. Hushi felt her head started to pound due to these noisy guys. Hence, she took out several roast chickens that she had prepared long ago from her space, and threw one to each person. Finally, the surroundings quieted down, leaving only the muffled noise of chicken being chewed. When it was Nangongyu's turn to catch a roast chicken, he moved closer to Hushi and looked at her with resentment on his face. I want an assorted cake, shark fin soup cooked over purple sand, dragon and phoenix golden nest. Obviously, before it had only been him who was able to eat the dishes made by Sheer, yet now this group of brats had managed to taste it. Nangongyu was unwilling to accept it. Extremely unwilling. Seeing them all eating with looks of enjoyment, he was really itching to squish their stupid faces into a mud pit. A corner of Hushi's mouth twitched as she retrieved her hand that was about to give him the roast chicken. It's up to you whether you want to eat it or not, I don't care. This guy actually dared to order food. Did he think of her as a cook? Nangongyu quickly grabbed the roast chicken from her hand and taking advantage of the situation, her embraced her waist and whispered in her ear. I said before that you're not allowed to make food for others to eat as Sheer's taste only belongs to me, Hushi responded by kicking him away with distaste. After lunch, they took a moment to take a break and reorganize before preparing to continue on their journey. According to the map on the jade slip that Nangongyu had previously obtained, they were currently located in the Greenwood Realm, in the inner layer of the sealed dragon domain. There were no treasures that people would fight over in the Greenwood Realm. Only many fierce demonic beasts that were roaming around. Therefore, not many martial artists would specifically go out of their way to come here. However, according to Wu Yu's exploration, there was a medicinal field located in the Greenwood Realm where Zijin's master had grown his lifetime collection of spiritual herbs. Originally, the medicinal field had a strong rate of herb survival, and after 1,000 years of growth, the plants inside must be very precious. Nangongyu knew that Hushi's medical skill was superb, and that she was very interested in collecting uncommon spiritual plants. Since Gu Lufeng and the others didn't have anything they particularly wanted to do, they decided to proceed towards the medicinal field. In fact, the thing Hushi most wanted to find at this moment was the key to gain control over the secret territory. Unfortunately, she had had no idea that each layer of the secret territory was so dangerous. And anyway, if they wanted to leave the Greenwood Realm, they needed to find the formation, one location which couldn't be done within a short amount of time. Hence she could only give up. Moreover, there would certainly be many precious spiritual plants to be found in Zijin Master's medicinal field, and she wanted to take the opportunity to see if she could find the divine dragon fruit that the little dragon needed. If she could, then that would be great. Suddenly, she recalled something that the little dragon had said about the Burning Heaven Realm. Greenwood Realm, Burning Heaven Realm. Did this mean that the Burning Heaven Realm might also be part of the sealed dragon domain? The more she thought about it, the more likely she figured that she was correct. She was now starting to become a little impatient about gaining control of the secret territory. Greenwood Realm wasn't large, so in merely half a day they had managed to spot the location of the medicinal field, and found that it was enveloped by a white fog. The reason there was a fog was that this area could be considered the most sought-after location in the entire Greenwood Realm. The white fog should be covering Zijin Master's medicinal field where he had planted the spiritual plants, but examining it from the outside, the scene inside was indistinct, and they were completely unable to see anything clearly. There were at least a dozen martial artists surrounding the white fog. Most of them were only Meridian stage, but there were also a few gold core stage martial artists. All of them were gazing towards the fog with a grave expression, an excited and anxious aura surrounding them. When Hushi and her group approached, they all turned around and glared at them, many of their faces morphing into a grave and dreadful expression. One formation, divided into battle formations and spell formations, although they are often just called formations. Battle formations are tactical formations used by several cultivators or martial artists attacking in concert. Spell formations are also called arrays. They're essentially magic circles which cast a continuous area of effect spell on the location the formation encompasses. Chapter 285. The Morong family. Many people wouldn't recognize His Highness Hell King, but still, Wuyu had quickly made him a disguise so that no one would know his true identity just in case. But even though Hell King was disguised, an imposing aura was still being released from Hushi's group, particularly from Qinglong and Wuyu. The two of them hadn't bothered to conceal their cultivation base at all, and with them both being at the peak of Gold Core stage, it caused the group surrounding the fog to shrink back in alarm. A martial artist in the early ranks of Gold Core stage came forward and warily sized them up. "You also want to enter the medicinal field?" Wuyu indifferently responded. "If so, then what? I'll give you a bit of advice. You had better leave this place immediately." The martial artist then lifted his head and arrogantly said, "Let me tell you the truth. This medicinal field has been claimed by our Morong family. You can enter if you want, but you'll have to pay 80% of whatever you earn from the medicinal field to us." Before Wu Yu could reply, he saw Gu Lufeng, who had been silently listening to this the whole time, suddenly take a step forward and sneer as he said, "If we don't agree? Don't agree." The martial artist burst into loud laughter. "Do you think that just because your cultivation base is high that you can take whatever you want from this medicinal field? I'll tell you now that in here, even if your cultivation base high, you still can't overturn the wind and the waves. Even if you're a dragon on the outside, once you're in our Morong family's territory, you have to be obedient." Morong family? Gu Lufeng slowly stressed the word. The head of the Morong family belongs to one of Yanjing City's 4 great clans. Don't tell me you don't know this? Arrogance flitted across the Gold Core stage martial artist's face, and he looked at Gu Lufeng in contempt. "If you don't abide by Greenwood Realm's rules, even if you leave, my Morong family will never let you go. So if you're tactful, you should either get lost, or you'll obediently do what we tell you to do." That martial artist hadn't yet finished speaking when a fierce red light shot from Gu Liufeng's hand, uttering a shrill scream as he flew back several feet. The martial artist then smashed heavily to the ground. His eyes opened wide as they filled with disbelief. On his chest, there was a still ablaze wound that spread him open from chest to abdomen. "You." Blood continuously flowed from his mouth and his face was a terrifying sight, filled with obstinacy. Ultimately, he was unable to finish what he was saying before he stopped breathing. All the martial artists who were watching this had the same frightened expression on their faces, due to Gu Liufeng's ruthlessness, whether they were Morong family subordinates or a few of the Nalan family subordinates. While on the contrary, the group of people from Hushi's side were completely unmoved regarding Gu Liufeng's abrupt violence. To them, it was as if what he had killed was nothing more but an insignificant ant. Instead, the rather gossipy Wu Yu leaned towards Gu Lufeng and whispered, "Oh, do you hate the Morong family?" Gu Lufeng calmly retrieved his long sword, an indolent smile hanging on a corner of his mouth. "They're nothing but a group of dressed-up pigs that are unpleasant to the eyes. It's best to slaughter them when you see them. What hatred are you talking about?" Hearing that, Wu Yu let out a fit of laughter and didn't bother trying to pry further into Gu Liufeng's privacy. Rather, he pointed at a martial artist beside the white fog and demanded, "You come here." That person was a middle-ranked Meridian stage martial artist. After just witnessing Gu Liufeng's ruthlessness, his face instantly turned white when he was called over, and he wished he could dig a hole to hide himself in. Don't call me. I'm not from the Morong family. I was staying here in the hopes that I could take advantage of any trouble that might occur." Wu Yu sneered. "Just come here when I tell you to. Talk any more nonsense, and I'll rip your tongue out of your mouth to be a snack that'll accompany a glass of wine." The Meridian stage martial artist was scared witless and began shaking all over. Frantically rushing forwards, he dropped to his knees before Wu Yu's feet, trembling as he kowtowed to beg for mercy. Chapter 286. The White Fog's absorption of spiritual power. Wu Yu crossed his arms in front of his chest as he asked, "Tell me, what's with this strange white fog? Why did that useless trash from the Morong family say that even if someone's cultivation base is high, they still couldn't overturn the wind and the waves? How could a low-level martial artist ever dare to conceal the truth? Hurriedly he replied, "Senior, please spare me my little life. I'll tell you everything that I know. I don't know what formations are inside the fog, but no matter how high a person's cultivation base is, when they enter that white fog, their spiritual power will quickly start to drain away. Moreover, any methods you might have to control your spiritual power will become ineffective once inside. Even if it were a martial artist of nascent soul stage, they would also become an ordinary person without any cultivation base. A person's spiritual power will quickly drain away?" Wu Yu stroked his chin while frowning. Then he said, "Do you know what happens to the ones who go inside?" The martial artist's face now looked somewhat frightened as he shook his head. "We went in for a while and found that the road ahead was endless and obscured. When we realized that the spiritual power within our bodies was draining at high speed, we escaped out of fear. This humble one had 2 companions with him who didn't believe in evil. They went in, but the jade life tablets they left with this humble one shattered. If a jade life tablet were to shatter, then that would mean that the martial artist who owned it had died." Wiping away the perspiration on his forehead, the martial artist continued in a trembling voice. "Once this humble one left the white fog, this humble one discovered that after a full 2 hours my spiritual power restored itself. Unfortunately, during that period this humble one's strength was lacking more 50% of its usual power. Due to that, this humble one nearly lost his life to all the martial artists who had surrounded the white fog hoping to collect any small advantage. If it were not for this humble one handing over several treasures, this humble one would have long been on the journey to the Underworld." Wu Yu frowned as he turned to look at Nangongyu and Hushi. The white fog could absorb all of a martial artist's spiritual power? This issue was indeed troublesome. Since the medicinal field was inside the white fog, it was unknown whether any of the martial artists who had previously entered had met with an ambush, or if after they had left the medicinal field, with their spiritual powers wholly depleted, they just couldn't resist an attack. It would have been like slaughtering fish in a barrel. Wu Yu glanced at a few of the gold core stage martial artists standing nearby. Other than glaring towards Hushi's group, none of them blindly attacked. Satisfied with how they were now acting, he said, "So now you stay here in the hopes that when someone comes out from inside, you can take advantage of their powerlessness to loot them? Didn't the Morong family take control of this area? They still allow you all to take advantage here?" Trembling, the low-rank martial artist broke out into a cold sweat before hanging his head and saying, "What the Morong family want is some of the rare spiritual plants inside the medicinal field. In particular, they seem to be looking for a 7th-grade spiritual herb known as the mythical heart herb. The Morong family will thoroughly search every person that exits the white fog, and then those that remain and are deemed unnecessary by them are then left for us to search and divide between us." Wu Yu had nothing more to ask, so he waved his hand and allowed the martial artist to return to where he'd previously been standing. Then, turning towards Nangongyu, he said, "Master, the risk of entering the white fog is too big. It's better to let me and Qinglong go to the medicinal field while you and young Master Shi wait outside." "Out of the question," Hushi immediately vetoed. "You wouldn't be able to recognize any of the medicinal herbs, and you also don't know to pick them safely. I want to go to the medicinal field by myself. You can wait outside." What a joke. Her space was the best place to transplant the medicinal herbs. If there were any precious spiritual plants in the medicinal field, she would of course straight away move them into her space to ensure their survival. If she didn't go in herself, the damage to the herbs would be too significant. Upon hearing that, Nangongyu's face instantly darkened. "Shier, you should just drop the matter. I said before that I'd never let you leave me. Not to mention, letting you go to such a dangerous place alone is impossible." Chapter 287. Tied together forever. Qinglong and Wu Yu were alarmed, quickly moving to prevent Nangongyu from risking himself. "Master, your identity is rather extraordinary. If you were to lose your cultivation base and people knew it, then the consequences would be unthinkable. If you're worried about young Master Shi's safety, then Wu Yu and I can accompany him. We swear we won't let young Master Shi suffer any injuries. A corner of Gu Liufeng's mouth perked up, while a charming smile flowed within his eyes. It's also okay if you don't go. I'll accompany Little Yue. With me partnered with Little Yue. What difficulties won't we sweep away? What do you think about it, Little Yue? Am I right? With a languid appearance, he leaned over to put his arm over Hushi's shoulder. Qinglong and Wu Yu's eyes widened. This good for nothing. Even at a time like this he still dared to provoke Nan Gongyu. Sure enough, a glint of coldness appeared in Nan Gongyu's eyes, and an invisible beam of spiritual energy shot forth. With a swish, it instantly pulled Hushi to his side. Following that, Gu Lufeng cried out in shock from the sudden action. Jumping away, electricity had now scorched the long hair that had previously hung in front of his face into a bundle of smoking ends. This resulted in him cutting a sorry figure. Nan Gongyu glared at him coldly, slowly stressing, "It'll never be necessary for you to protect my people. I will never allow Sheer to leave me." Even more, he would never allow Sheer to be alone with this bastard. Master. Qinglong and Wu Yu were full of anxiety, but they just couldn't persuade Nan Gongyu to stay. Having no other alternative, they threw pleading looks towards Hushi. Hushi held her forehead. She would like nothing more than to get rid of these annoying people, and just go in herself, but, seeing Nan Gongyu's persistent gaze and Gu Liufeng's smiling eyes, forget it. She had better things to do and didn't want to waste any effort. Hushi's gaze fell on the white fog, with a hint of doubt flashing within her eyes. She couldn't hold back and reached out her hand to touch it. There didn't seem to be any unusual feeling or spiritual power absorption. It appeared that she needed to be inside to experience it personally. In the end, how did this white fog absorb a person's spiritual power? Don't be so noisy, Hushi muttered. I'm curious about this white fog that absorbs spiritual power. I'll go in first to take a look, while you all stay to discuss who will go and who will stay. Nan Gongyu instantly responded, I'll go with you. I'm just going in to take a look, not heading towards the medicinal field. I don't need anyone to accompany me. Hushi looked up and saw Nan Gongyu's persistently stubbornly expression, so she helplessly said, or you can take your golden silk and tie it around me, will that do? Hushi had said this as a joke, but who would have thought that when Nan Gongyu heard it, his eyes lit up and he immediately took out the golden silk. A moment later, Hushi watched as the golden silk was tied between her right hand and Nan Gongyu's left hand, causing a corner of her mouth to twitch. Nan Gongyu then leaned closer to her ear and whispered, Sheer, I really want to tie you like this to me forever. Hushi turned around and stormed into the white fog without the slightest hesitation. She refused to look at this shameless guy. After barely entering, Hushi felt an immense force suctioning out her spiritual power within the white fog. Her complexion turned pale, while from a distance she could just hear someone's shrieks. Let me out! Let me leave this damned fog. I no longer want any treasure. Just let me leave. The white fog was not only able to absorb a person's spiritual power, but it was also able to make fear bloom within a person's heart and confuse their mind, resulting in them becoming lost within the white fog. Along with this, after their spiritual power was utterly drained, the martial artists would then find that their vitality would start to drain away. So for most people who went into the white fog, they would find themselves unable to come out, but still unable to reach the medicinal field. Unfortunately, this would end with them losing their lives within the white fog. Chapter 288, barely satisfactory. After a moment of silence, Hushi's expression regained its tranquility. For her, although her cultivation base was significant, it wasn't her only way to save a person's life. She still had poison, qinggong, and her internal power. If there was anyone who dared to rush over and provoke her, she wasn't afraid to fix that person's appearance. As Hushi's heart calmed down, she began to sense the spiritual power in her body gradually draining away, as if an external force was pulling and pushing her dantian to make it release her spiritual power. However, the spiritual power that was released didn't form any fluctuations in the surroundings as the white fog immediately absorbed it. Hushi tried burning the white fog, but found that the spiritual fire was barely released from her body before it disappeared without a trace. As time went on, more and more spiritual power drained from her body, and once it reached almost 80%, her complexion was nearly deathly white. But suddenly she opened her eyes, and within them, a trace of understanding was visible while a confident smile graced her lips. Outside the white fog, Nangongyu's hand tightly gripped the golden silk. His outward expression was calm, but his clenched fist exposed his nervousness. Abruptly, his eyes lit up, and gazing towards the white fog, he saw a slender silhouette slowly moving closer. With facial features as bright as sunlight within the white fog, her appearance resembled the most enchanting fairies of the demon beast forest. This image firmly lodged itself in his heart, and he found that he was no longer able to free himself. As soon as Hushi exited the white fog, she immediately swallowed a spiritual supplement pill that was made with spirit spring water, and began to meditate to regulate her spiritual power. She had already discovered a way to deal with the white fog, but first, she needed to restore her spiritual power, and then she would go in to try again. The spiritual supplement pill had barely entered Hushi's body before she suddenly felt tranquil spiritual power suffuse her body from her back. Slowly entering her body, that spiritual power carried with it a familiar warmth and gentleness. It was Nangongyu. He was using his spiritual power to assist her body in absorbing the spiritual supplement pill and accelerate its effects. Hushi closed her eyes and obediently accepted Nangongyu's spiritual power. Gradually, her dried-up dantian filled, and a corner of her mouth stretched into a faint smile. Half an hour later, Hushi stood up and said, "I want to enter the white fog again." With that, not waiting for everyone's reaction, she took out a few silver needles and inserted them into several of her acupuncture points. Then, she turned and entered the white fog without hesitation. This time, Hushi only stayed in for a quarter of an hour. However, after she came out, her complexion was rosy, and her smile even reached her eyes. Unlike before, she didn't appear weak and pale due to the loss of spiritual power. Wu Yu and the others were confused at first, but once they realized what had happened, they stared at her with wide eyes. "Young Master Shi, you found a way to suppress the loss of spiritual power?" Hushi nodded and took her pulse. Then, with regret evident in her voice, she said, "I've found a way to suppress the loss of spiritual power, but that can only prevent the loss to about 80%. Moreover, this kind of method is normally only used to strengthen a person. In an environment such as the white fog, attacking is absolutely impossible. In the end, figuring out a way within such a short time left me with barely satisfactory results." "This is still barely satisfactory? You're not satisfied? How do you let other people live if these are your standards?" Wu Yu glanced at Qinglong, his face full of shock and admiration. This princess of his was too awesome. None of the Gold Core stage or Nascent Soul stage martial artists had been able to do anything about the white fog, but their princess's hands had effortlessly brushed it aside. TSK, she really was a woman worthy of his abnormal master's fancy. Hushi lifted her head to look at everyone. "To be sure, it's best if someone amongst you all goes in and tries it out." She wanted to test it out just in case there was someone with a slightly unusual constitution. If she were unable to seal their acupuncture points, then that would be troublesome. Chapter 289. "I'll go wherever you go." Qinglong quickly stepped forward. "Young Master Shi, let this subordinate try it." Hushi nodded her head and stuck several needles into his body without hesitation. The amount of time that Qinglong stayed in was rather long, so it was about half an hour before he rejoined them. The moment that he came out of the white fog, the ordinarily calm Qinglong now had a face full of smiles as he walked up to Hushi and said respectfully, "Young Master Shi, your medical knowledge has really reached perfection. To be able to suppress the loss of spiritual power by sealing acupuncture points, one would first have to have a deep understanding and confidence in the human body and meridian structures." It was also at this moment that Qinglong was utterly convinced. If they were to ever find a cure to Nangongyu's cold illness in Miluo continent, it would be in their princess's hands. Hushi's brows furrowed. Although this method can solve a part of the problem, I feel that the dangers in the medicinal field will be far more than this. Furthermore, I don't know how much land the white fog covers. If we were to stay in it for a few hours and were unable to come out, then it's very likely that sealing off our acupuncture points wouldn't be able to prevent the draining of spiritual power. You better clearly think about whether or not you want to take the risk of going in with me. These people were locally born and bred cultivators who were public figures. For them to be without spiritual power would be equal to them having their hands and feet broken, which would be far too dangerous. As for herself, spiritual power had never been the only way to protect herself. In a crisis, she just didn't care about how much spiritual power she lost. However, before Hushi could finish speaking, Nangongyu lightly tapped her nose and unhappily said, "Little girl without conscience, I've said it so many times before, but you still want to leave me behind. I said previously that I'd go wherever you go, so don't ever think of abandoning me." Since Nangongyu wanted to go in, of course, Wuyu and Qinglong would follow him. After all, compared to these useless people who were attempting to rob treasures on the outside, there were likely to be more dangers in the medicinal field. While Gulufeng, on the other hand, gave a smug look. "I said before that I wanted to go on an adventure together with little Yuer," he laughingly said, completely ignoring the sharp glare that Nangongyu was throwing him. In the end, only Zhou Yenin and several of the bodyguards from Hell King Manor remained outside the white fog. Their cultivation bases weren't high, so Qinglong made them hide far away to wait for more orders once they left the white fog. When Hushi saw how many people were determined to enter the medicinal field with her, she no longer tried to persuade them, and instead fished out a bottle of medicinal pills and handed them to everyone. This is a kind of medicinal pill that can increase a martial artist's strength and speed in a short period. The medicine is relatively mild, and the effect isn't too excessive. If an ordinary martial artist were to take this, they could withstand a level 3 or 4 chi refining stage martial artist at most, but the advantage is the duration time. Moreover, it has no side effects on the body. These medicines had initially been prepared to help Shijia and the others while they were training. When Hushi had refined them, she'd kept a few bottles in her space, but she'd never expected there would be a time when they would come in handy. The people surrounding Hushi each held a pill with an amazed expression, not doubting her words in the slightest. During this time, Hushi had utterly subdued them all with her incredible medical skills. Even Gu Lufeng swallowed the pill without hesitation. When the effect of the medicinal pill was felt within his body, shock covered his face. As he gazed at Hushi, his eyes gleamed with a brilliant light. Outside the white fog, several martial artists were watching as they hid in the distance. When they saw that Nangongyu and the others were entering and exiting the white fog several times, before finally entering the white fog and disappearing from their sight, they couldn't help but exclaim in shock. "They're really entering the white fog? Aren't they afraid that they'll be unable to come out, and will be completely lost in there?" Chapter 290. A Hell-like World. When they were going in and out of the white fog before, could it be that it was to find a secret method? How could there be a secret method? When they entered the white fog, they didn't have any spiritual power fluctuation. This was a clear sign that their spiritual power is being absorbed by the white fog. Humph, this group of idiots. It must be because their cultivation bases are so profound that they're able to get through the white fog. In that case, we just have to wait here to profit from them. But those people's cultivation bases were so high and their methods were so vicious. What if by chance their cultivation bases are high so that without their cultivation bases they only end up like ordinary people? At that time, the more treasures they have, the greater the benefits we can get. Humph, daring to oppose my Morong family. I'll let that stinky brat who wore a mask know what happens to those who offend my Morong family. Inside the white fog, there was a bone-chilling aura. Without spiritual power, a cultivation base, and having your physical strength drained away little by little, this was a hell-like world. However, this was more terrible compared to gradually moving towards a possible death as hidden within the dense fog. The sounds of a massacre could suddenly be heard all around. "Ah, spare me. I beg you, spare me. I'll give you all of my treasures." Wretched screams and begging echoed throughout the thick fog. However, the only response that was given was the rough and excited laughter of men. Sparing your life just gets us treasure, but if we kill you, then the treasures and your woman are all ours. You tell us if it was you, what would you choose? The figures of 7 to 8 sturdy and tall men with their faces covered with a black cloth surrounded a small group of people. The lead man's eyes were slanted at an angle as he looked at the young girl with lewd and greedy intentions. We're disciples of the Red Cloud sect of the Tiangang Kingdom. If you dare lay your hands on us, my sect master will never let you off. However, that masked man laughed and said, The Red Cloud sect won't let us off? That depends on whether or not you can escape from here. As long as you silently die here and your bodies rot away leaving only bones, no one will ever discover your presence. Being surrounded, the 5 martial artists' faces showed horrified and desperate expressions. Within this white fog, their spiritual power had utterly disappeared, and their weak bodies were even more susceptible to attacks than an ordinary person's. These vulgar men before them had cultivation bases that were merely in the early ranks of Meridian's stage. Outside the white fog, they wouldn't even be good enough to carry the shoes of a Red Cloud sect's disciple. But now they had the nerve to try and kill them. The masked leader burst into loud laughter and waved his hand as he said, Brothers, except for that beautiful young lady, smash the rest of their heads in for me using giant hammers. As his words fell, several men rushed forward shouting strangely. The noise similar to the sound a swarm of hornets make leaving their nest. Every one of them held a gigantic weapon in their hand. Some were holding giant hammers, some were holding large swords, and there was even one who held a huge and heavy axe. These heavy weapons were simply unable to be held up by ordinary people. However, in the men's hands they were like swaying toys. In just a short moment, for young martial artists had their bodies effortlessly smashed, a blood-curdling screech piercing the silence as they fell to the ground. The terrifying part though was that one person was split open from head to toe by the large axe, causing his internal organs and blood to spew to the ground. This scene was extremely bloody and terrifying. The young girl was the only one who remained, and she released a horrified shriek, her voice full of fear and despair. The masked leader was covered in sweat as he stepped forward and pulled at the girl, forcing her to stand up. Then he maniacally laughed as he said, Brothers, do you see her? Such a soft and tender-skinned young girl with a cultivation base at the peak of Meridian's stage. I'm sure in her large sect she's the cream of the crop. Have you ever tasted such a delicacy before? Chapter 291. This group of animals. Everyone roared with laughter and jeered in unison. After eldest brother finishes having fun with her, it'll be our turn. The girl struggled with all her might to escape from the man's large hands, simultaneously letting out a heart-rending screech. You're all animals. Animals. If you dare touch me, my master and daddy will never let you go. Kill me if you have the ability. The masked man yelled as he groped her chest, laughing with a lecherous expression. Kill you? Such a beautiful girl. How could we be willing to kill you? The force of his grip increased, and a tearing sound could be heard as the girl's clothes were instantly torn to shreds, revealing her soft skin and red undergarments. Indeed, this is an item of the highest quality. Saliva pooled in the men's mouths, and their eyes gleamed with fiery lust. Eldest brother, what are you waiting for? Quickly fuck this girl. With the fog being so thick and heavy, it's a natural barrier from prying eyes. The masked leader's eyes were also shining as he turned to his brother behind him, and said, Shoho, hold this girl's feet for me, don't let her move. After his words, he immediately pinned the girl to the ground as if she was an animal. The girl's miserable and desperate shrieks echoed incessantly throughout the thick fog. However, her resounding scream was unanswered. Furthermore, even if someone did hear it, what could they do? Everyone in this thick fog was rendered powerless, so who could come and save her? In the blink of an eye, the masked man had completely stripped off the girl's clothes. Shoho couldn't help but loudly swallow his saliva as he held the girl down, an impatient expression on his face. All of a sudden, Shoho felt something cold touch his neck that caused a sharp twinge. He couldn't help but reach out his hand to touch his neck. Yet unexpectedly, his line of sight abruptly changed and flipped completely upside down. Shouho opened his eyes wide with shock and stared helplessly at his now headless body. He then watched as it incessantly spewed forth a tremendous amount of blood that splashed across the girl's body, as well as the boss's. Arg! Amongst the robust men standing around in a circle and watching, the cowardly ones uttered screams of terror. The masked leader, who was soaked in blood, finally returned to his senses and suddenly jumped up, gripping his large axe as he shouted, "Who are you that you dared to launch a sneak attack on us? Quickly reveal yourself." As his words fell, he saw a vague silhouette slowly moving within the white fog. It was a youngster who looked to be about 16 to 17 years old. He had snow-white skin, striking features, and bright red lips that were slightly pursed, like a red plum flower that had softly fallen onto the snow in winter. As he gradually appeared, the dense fog swept across his face, slicking back the jet-black strands of his satin-like hair, and causing it to gently stick to his slender and fair neck. Following the gorgeous arc of his neck, it gracefully extended downwards to an exquisite collarbone, prompting wild and fanciful thoughts. The masked leader gulped. He could clearly see that the person before his eyes was a man, yet he still couldn't help but feel his throat tighten, his breathing deepen, and the stirring in his genitals that had vanished due to the blood just a moment ago was now back and throbbing more vigorously than before. Oh shit. This was apparently a young man, however. To think that he was actually more seductive than the young lady from the Red Cloud sect. Stinky brat. You must have guts if you want to be a hero and rescue a beauty. Or do you want to replace that young lady and have fun with us brothers instead? The youngster ignored him and laughed, a corner of his mouth lifting into a stunning curve before he suddenly waved his right hand. A purple shadow flew like a lightning bolt towards the man who spoke. Before he could react, that purple shadow abruptly wrapped around his neck and dragged him forwards like a dead fish. Chapter 292. Helping others. When everyone could finally see what it was, they saw that the purple shadow was actually a vine. Moreover, it was emitting a frightening amount of spiritual pressure. Who did you want to have fun with? The youngster's voice echoed in their ears. It was a clear and melodious voice which was pleasant to listen to, but when it reached their ears, it was like hearing an evil spirit from the underworld. The man hanging from the vine opened his eyes wide and wanted to beg for mercy, but before he could utter a word, a crack resounded in his ears as his neck was instantly snapped, and he lost his life. A corner of the youngster's mouth curled up into a cruel smile. As for the rest of you, who else wants to have fun with me? The very youngster before them now was Hushi. Not long after she'd entered the white fog, she was separated from Nangong Yu and the others. As for the reason of their separation, Hushi had noticed that the purple vine in her hand was restless. After entering the white fog, Hushi discovered that the white fog did more than merely injure a martial artist than just absorbing their spiritual power. Within the white fog, there was a hard-to-detect aura of ice-cold spiritual power. It entered a martial artist's meridians little by little, gradually slowing their movements. If they had a spiritual power supplement, it wouldn't really matter, but because spiritual power couldn't be used within the white fog, they could only purely rely on physical strength to resist the cold. Since everyone's physical strength decreased extremely fast, in just a short period their complexions had all become somewhat pale. Only Nangong Yu and Hushi didn't seem to be affected by the white fog. It was at this time that Hushi was surprised to discover that Nangong Yu had a dual soul cultivation base. Although he still couldn't use spiritual power, the cold air within the dense fog was nothing to him. While Hushi, on the other hand, wasn't affected because of the plant spirit pet that she'd just taken in. Though Hushi would never have guessed that the draining effect the white fog had towards spiritual power would be utterly ineffective towards the purple abyss vine. Not long after entering the white fog, the purple abyss vine had quietly left her space to explore, full of happiness and joy as it occasionally absorbed the spiritual power within the white fog. This caused Hushi to feel comfortably warm without a trace of coldness. However, what Hushi didn't expect was that after the purple abyss vine had absorbed an enormous amount of spiritual power from the white fog, it unexpectedly had a small advancement. This transformation affected the white fog and unfortunately caused a whirlpool to form inside the fog. But because the purple abyss vine was her spirit pet, She was directly involved and was drawn into the whirlpool too. As soon as she awoke, she found herself alone. When Hushi recalled being swept up into the whirlpool, she remembered Nangongyu's frightened and sorrowful expression, as well as his trembling shouts. Her heart couldn't help but slightly tighten. That guy, he was really worried about her? Hushi returned from her train of thought about Nangongyu and swept her icy gaze over the masked men, before ultimately settling them on the undressed girl. The clothes on the girl's body had long been torn to reveal her delicate skin, but sadly, it also showed the ghastly bruises and cuts that covered her. The girl's expression had been blank, as if she'd reached an extreme level of fear and desperation. It wasn't until her gaze had locked with Hushi's that she'd finally realized that she was saved, and it was then that she'd broken down into loud sobs. At that moment, she'd really thought that she was ruined. Even if she hadn't died today, her life would have still been the same as a dead person's. However, at such a critical moment, this godlike youngster had appeared like a hero with a bright cloud beneath his feet, rescuing her from hell. Hushi's eyes widened, and her cold gaze traveled back towards the few masked who were still panicking. Originally, I wasn't interested in meddling in other people's business, but who told you all to commit such a disgusting act? You're all worse than pigs. You're fortunate for running into me today, since this young master occasionally likes to help others. After all, what harm is there in helping others once in a while? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.